Whatever it takes. It's Hallie. Just say when. Just say when. Just say when. I gotta feed the block, fuck with it, you ain't gon' lose his top, yeah. All the time that I lost, I'm watching both hands on top of the clock, yeah. My niggas, they say I'm the one, I had to believe inside I'm a pop, yeah. I got a voice inside, they tell me to live, and I can't stop, yeah. Just say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
Waiting.
Roll now, I was watching it go down, I don't feel like I'm home now. All the love that I get from the whole town, yeah, we know that it's up now. Thank God that we moved from whole pounds, we be rocking them shows now. Paranoid that I got from a past life, got me gripping the 4 pound. Wild life I was living before now, now we breaking the dough down. Same pain that's inside of my heart, nigga, on God I won't fold down. Shine light, gotta shine on the whole crowd, show the world how to glow now. God body what I'm giving the world now, cause I'm showing my son how. Gotta move hand thing like AK. Gotta move hand thing like AK. Gotta move hand thing like AK. Like AK, yeah. I gotta feed the block, fuck with it, you ain't gon' lose his top, yeah. All the time that I lost, I'm watching both hands on top of the clock, yeah. My niggas, they say I'm the one, I had to believe inside I'm a pop, yeah. I got a voice inside, tell me to live. Now I can't stop, yeah. Just say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
I'm waiting for you just
say when.
Waiting.
Whatever it takes. It's Hallie.
Right, this shit crazy.
Feel nothing at all. For my pain, it don't feel nothing at all. Yeah. For my pain, it don't feel nothing at all. For these niggas, nah, ain't nothing but God. I had to move around with nothing but frauds. I tried to bring the team together, get my vision involved. I gave a plan, but niggas scrambled. It's time to pick up that call. You can't get 1,500 in a 6-week span. Time to pay up, everybody goes, I be down. I should've seen it. All I got is Rain, Slim, Tim, you know it's Teach. I got Tay and I got Lee. I got Deja inside Lee. I got 4. They got beat. They say your name, that's cause you preach. Them niggas folded under heat. No umbrella and just say it, let it rain down. Yeah.
My nigga, did you say?
Let it rain down.
Let it rain down.
Right, it's crazy.
Yeah. We gotta weather the storm. If you don't understand, get better informed. I'm from the trench, but y'all want the same shit, but can't get on the same page. How bad do y'all really want it? Niggas just be saying things, replacing with y'all lives now. Everything that I pipe down. Yeah, I was chilling for a minute, but I'm live now. Niggas talking about the past, come get with me right now. Come and really see my grind. Come and see me live now. I'm live now. I'm live now. Come and see me live now. Ain't no umbrella, let them shots rain down. You believe the dream, then stand up, if not lay down. Feel it rain down. My nigga, then just say it. You ain't got it, then just say it. Let it rain down. Yeah. Ain't no umbrella, let them shots rain down. You believe the dream, then stand up, if not lay down. Feel it rain down. If you my nigga, then just say it. You ain't got it, then just say it. Let it rain down. Let it rain down. Yeah.
My nigga, did you say it? My brother, did you say it?
Let it rain down.
Let it rain down.
out to everybody that's in a bit, man. If we can get a mic check from everybody in here in just a second. But before we get that, man, shout out to everybody that's tuning in, man. Shout out to all the like-minded brothers and sisters that's tuning in, that's searching for truth. We appreciate you guys for tapping in. But we got another heavyweight jam, man. We got another heavyweight jam. Y'all know how we do it over here. Excuse me, Big Aboriginal Power Platform, man. We got Dr. Longo in here. We got a Hanu Kiel, aka a Autochthonous one, in the building, man. Make sure y'all hit that like button, thumb up the video, support the channel. Most important thing you guys can do is thumb up that video, share it at least once or twice on any social media outlet of your choice, and come back and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell, you guys. Shout out to everybody in the building, man. Let's get right into it. Autochthonous one, Dr. Longo. Can we get a mic check from you brothers?
Howdy. You guys hear me?
Peace, man.
Peace,
Yep.
Alrighty. I hear you guys loud and clear.
All right, let's get it, man. Y'all on the floor. So yeah, A1 in the building, Dr. Longo in the building. Hey, we got a heavyweight jam right here. Like I said, we're gonna be decoding ancient history of America, and we probably touch on various other countries and places around the globe as well. But we're just gonna be breaking down history, trying to make some sense out of it, and do our best to explain this history, and based off of the data and facts that we got, man. So A1, I'm gonna let you say something to the brothers and sisters, and then we'll let Dr. Longo greet himself as well. Shout out to A1.
Peace to all Aborigines, North, South, Central, and the conjoining islands. You already know what this is, man. We just gonna be going in on some history. You know, we'll probably be jumping around, probably take it a couple of different places, but definitely be something that will be informative. So, you know, if you are a researcher, definitely get your pens and pads ready. You already know what it is. Peace to guys, peace to guys.
Yeah, man. It's one-on-one, man. So if you ain't watched one, if y'all want to go viral today, man, I'm telling you, get your screen records ready. Get you whatever you got to do. Put them clips up. Put them snaps up. We got some heat today. Dr. Longo, I'm going to let you greet the family today. Go ahead. You got it.
Well, thanks. Thanks, AP, for having me. Thank you, A1. And I'm glad to be here. Ready to get into some good stuff.
Definitely, man. I'm gonna let A1 engage the conversation. I'm pretty sure he got some stuff and angles he want to go with. But before we let A1 get into it, I want to kind of get everybody to be peaceful, cordial. We're not going to block anyone if they are disrespectful. Politely put them in timeout. And make sure you guys support the channel. A1, I'm gonna let you just take off wherever you want to go with it. Pretty sure Dr. Longo can keep up. Let's get it.
No, I'm actually gonna let Dr. Longo. I'm gonna piggyback off of him.
Sounds beautiful.
For
Sounds
sure.
beautiful.
All good with me. Just happy to be here, guys. So I just finished up a book. This book is called The Florida of the Inca, or rather, written in Spanish initially, La Florida de la Inca. And when I saw this in a bookstore, old Florida bookstore, it kind of jumped out at me because it's not often you see the words Florida and Inca in the same sentence. And even as much as digging as I had done into Florida, I was not aware of where this connection comes from. And it was actually during my research into the Miami Circle and the new 444 Brickell site, which is the new Miami site that everyone's kind of going crazy over. On my way back.
Wait. You said what?
I'm gonna need you to elaborate on that 444 Brickell site, brother.
Okay, sure. So in downtown Miami, Brickell is a certain neighborhood of downtown Miami. In Brickell, there's a bridge, the Brickell Avenue Bridge. Now, on one side of this bridge is what's called the Miami Circle. It's also nicknamed America's Stonehenge. Many different things, many different nicknames, but it's pretty much the most significant archaeological site on the east coast of the United States, especially along the coastline, and it's the only significant site in the United States of officially. Now, of course, that's the mainstream. They're reluctant to admit some stuff, but they're going with the title that this is the only manipulation of bedrock on the east coast of prehistoric America. So it's pretty significant, and I'll pull up a picture so you guys can see what I mean. But basically, it's a circle, and this circle, okay, I'm gonna show up a picture right here. This is the Miami Circle. Now, this is the circle, of course. This is the Brickell Avenue Bridge in the background, and you can almost make out a pillar here. Well, right on the other side of this bridge, so if you were to cross the street, not cross the bridge to the right, but if you were to cross the street to the other side of the bridge, which is west, east is behind us, the beach is right behind us, or the ocean is right behind us as we're looking at this picture. And we're heading west right now, facing west. If you were to cross this bridge, recently, in the last couple months, they've just publicized a new site, 444, and that's the address that it's located at, which is pretty funny to me. 444 Brickell Avenue, or Brickell, whatever, is the new site. Now, this new site, they're dating to over 7,000 years old. And why this is kind of going viral is there's a quote of the guy saying, this is older than the pyramids by far. This is older than Mesopotamia. This is older than all of this. And this is in the tip of peninsular Florida, which in the mainstream is supposedly one of the last places that civilization would have arrived. Now, this clearly disproves that, but there's some other significant stuff with the circle. So the circle they found in, I think, 1998 or 1999. And when they found that, they really weren't sure what it was. Well, some independent researchers, some geniuses, basically got thinking. And I'm going to present another one here. This circle, which was already being nicknamed America's Stonehenge, because what it is cut holes into the bedrock. So you see this ring around the outline here. These are deep gashes, like
This could be a huge calendar.
Oh, well, just about. You're pretty much right. That's about what it is. And it's excavated down into the limestone bedrock in this ring here on the outside. Now, in the middle, all these tiny little holes, originally they thought were natural. These are not natural, not at all. They've proved this. Even the skeptics have been satisfied completely satisfied with the proof that these have been man-made holes. So everyone's in agreement with that. The mainstream, the skeptics.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now, what's special about this is, see these large holes? See the largest hole right here with the red ring?
Me too. I see two of them on the screen.
Yeah. This is actually, and if people can't tell by now, this is actually a star map, a map of the sky. Well, it's not from Miami, and we're going to talk about that, meaning it's not from the perspective of someone standing in Miami.
Let me just add some clarity as you go in, because you're going in. This is South Florida, correct?
Yep, downtown Miami.
And this is almost a correlation from the book that you just finished. And the book you just finished mentioned Incas being in these areas, correct?
Just about, yeah.
Okay.
Now this would have been much before then.
Of course, a lot older. That's right. What they estimated.
Yeah. Now, we're going to get into the book and why it's all connected and what does Inca have to do with Aboriginal Americans in the United States? Well, this is just one stitch that we're stitching here. And by the time we're done talking, we're going to have a pretty complete knitting of these two cultures and how they met, why they met, the etymology of Inca and Indian and Aboriginal. Well, what does ink mean? Colored, doesn't it? Ink. And Inca, well, that's the connection right there. We're going to get into some more stuff like that, but let's look at the Miami Circle. These little dots are stars, constellations. This big dot, how they really sunk their teeth into this and kind of confirmed this theory was that once they put this star map together, this larger hole, which was significantly larger, perfectly round, this is precisely where Halley's Comet would have been in the year 1131. 1131. Which coincides with the Inca. But what happens when they said, well, let's compare it to the skies viewed from Miami? It's not the sky viewed from Miami. This is the sky viewed from Nazca, Peru. Nazca, Peru being where the Nazca lines are, which are meant to be viewed from the sky, from space.
Right. So in other words, whoever mapped this map in Florida would have only been able to map this from a vantage point where the Nazca lines are, and by in Peru, right?
Absolutely. Okay.
Mm.
Now, I'll tell you another connection we were discussing before we went live. Peru, Indiana is in Miami County. So why is Peru? First off, why is there a city called Peru in Indiana? Second, why is it in Miami County? Peru, Miami. Well, we're looking at a Peruvian sky map carved into the ground in Miami.
Bomb drop. You see what I'm saying? That's crazy.
But look, remember this too. The Inca just wasn't. The Inca was a title, like a title like king, right? The Mayans would have also been Incans.
Right.
A lot of times when you read and you catch them calling the Mayans Incas as well.
It's almost like a different time frame. And so even though this site is credited to being much older than the credit cultures like the Inca and the Maya, what it shows is that these people has accustomed to coming here, and it's obviously developments and things going on even at initial and even afterwards.
Not even coming there though. They was already
there. They was already there.
Right, like he already made reference to the Mayans already, Miami, already in Florida. You know what I'm saying? So we already know that whole crescent right there, them people had civilization.
All right, and you absolutely right, A1. So we're not looking at a bunch of people that's not accustomed. That what you were looking at with that circle is a development process. These are cultures that's constantly coming here because their ancestors revered it, and they constantly drew and map out. And obviously, like you said, those two larger circles was at a later date from the initial site. So whoever created those larger holes had to been there at that particular time frame, which puts it in the time frame. So
exactly. Now, another connection. Coral Gables is kind of like a fancy suburb of Miami. It's where a lot of the rich live, and it's very fancy. Golf courses, big banyan trees. I just posted a video about Coral Gables. Now, in the 60s and 70s, when they were putting together a lot of these wire systems, grids, naval transport cargo ships going from South America to North America to Europe to Africa, Miami was always the place that they were choosing for the global port, the port of the entire planet. And this is kind of what like Honolulu is in the Pacific, the junction between East and West. Miami was chosen as the same thing. And they actually nicknamed Coral Gables the global city of the future. And there's all these quotes of all these executives. It's in the video that I just posted last night. All these executives saying it's kind of like flat Earth stuff, where like where not that this is what it's about, but like the flight patterns don't make sense. Well, they're all saying what this interview is about is they're all saying all electronic communication, wired, all cargo, all air cargo, actually among South America will go, if something's going from Peru to Venezuela, it's often cheaper, makes more sense, more advantageous, more profitable for it to go to Miami first, then to Venezuela. And I was thinking, how long has that been the case? Because that would absolutely make sense. Why there's almost like and that, by the way, I forgot to mention one important part. That's one circle, right? The Miami Circle. And that was in 1998, and they made a big deal about it. Well, in around 2011, 2012, they found 7 more circles. Now, those are still underneath parks and buildings, and those were not fully excavated. Those were not studied. Those were not. Where are those pictures of the sky from? So what else? It's almost like Miami is holding like a master key or the compass to the map. You know, it's a central location in modern times and in ancient times. Any person, Phoenicians, Moors, anybody, if they're going across the Atlantic, and they're coming from South America, Mexico, you know, Texas, anything, they're going to have to make a stop in Miami if they're going by ship. Yeah, you make that turn around Florida, Key West, or Miami. But let's get into some other stuff here. We'll strengthen this connection. And about this book, why this book is so special.
So a total of 8 circles. I just want to make sure there was a total of 8 circles that they found. Only
I don't know what the total is.
estimated.
I don't know what the total is, but I know for a fact they found 7 more circles.
7
But
more.
those don't have pictures. Those don't have. All there is there's a couple articles from Fox, ABC, and like local news sources that were saying they found more, and it's the same archaeologist who's doing all of these. I think his name's Robert Carr, and he's doing all the excavations in Brickell, and essentially all of downtown Brickell, which is like a big party place, big with young people. It's all of it is ancient burial grounds, star maps, and how they knew this. There's many people who try and say the Miami Circle is a teepee, right? Of course, they try and trivialize it the best they can. How do we know for a fact it's not a teepee? There's not a smidge of charcoal or burnt anything. No fire, nothing. No evidence of fire whatsoever. That tells you no one was living in it. That tells you pretty for sure no one was living in it. It was a ceremonial location or some place that people didn't step at all. And that's probably the case. But why we're talking about this book, this is not written by a Spaniard. He was part Spanish, but he was descended. His name is Garcilaso de la Vega, and he wrote under the name the Inca because he moved to Spain when he was 21, and he had grown up in Peru, of course, and his family, he is a direct descendant of the matriarchal line of the Inca royalty. So his mother's side was Inca royalty. So when he wrote this book, this is not recent history. This book was written before the Smithsonian was even conceived of. Before this was written in, I believe, the late 1500s, 1590s. The De Soto. This is about the De Soto expedition, Hernando de Soto's expedition to Florida, And at this time, why is this, again, why is this so important? At this time, all of America, all of the United States was referred to as La Florida. So everything was
Hold
Florida.
on, hold on, hold on, hold on. All of the United States was considered Florida?
All of the, in the eyes of the Spanish and the French and the Italian, yes.
Mm.
They called all, at this time, according to this narrative, and you can see this on maps, many maps, all of the southeastern United States was absolutely called La Florida. And actually, they refer to Alabamians, Louisianians, all of these people as Floridians. And I was reading this book because I wanted to learn about the connection between the Inca and Florida. What I found in this book is a hell of a lot more than that. There was so many gems in this book. We're gonna get into them all. I have them all earmarked. I have the files here, and I can read from them. But like I said, this is an Inca who wrote this book. And since De Soto had already been in Peru, and the conquistadors had already been in Peru, when they went on their expedition to Florida, this was like 20 years after Florida was discovered. They took with them Incas. They say, let's talk about who was on this voyage first before we get into it. A large amount of Spanish, Italian, Genovese soldiers, Berbers, Moors from Barbary. They say were traveling with them. But then separate from the Moors of Barbary, you had Negroes traveling with them. It does not say from Africa. However, once we get to the end of this book, there's really going to be some confirmations of some of your guys' theories, my theories. They're not really theories at this point, but it's an Inca. Why do I keep repeating that? Because the Spanish falsified much of what happened to glorify themselves. This was a person whose own people had just been trampled on by the Spanish. So he wrote a very true, unbiased account. And in his own words, he was very, he felt a duty to commend the natives of Florida and to write down all of their commemorable deeds as well. So that's basically it. There's a lot of good stuff in here. It passed all the censorship filters, is basically, long story short. And you'll see, let's just start with one of these things. When number one, starting off on the De Soto expedition, when they went into Florida, right off the bat, it's established the natives of Florida, on average, were a full foot taller than the average man on the expedition. So that's establishing a 6'6" average height, minimum. That's like a minimum height for men. As we're going to see, some of the queens were 7 feet tall. Chief Tuscaloosa, by the time they make it over to Alabama, Chief Tuscaloosa, who was a melanated man himself, it's clearly laid out in this book, was 10 feet tall. 10 feet tall, no BS. This man was a poet, and he wrote much poetry. When he wrote this book, he was doing so in the service of a man he saw as a teacher, a father figure to him, who had been on the expedition. So he was personally chronologizing this man's experience on the expedition. So you had that direct source, and then he corroborated all of these accounts with 2 other members who had served on that expedition. One of them also having Inca blood. So, as you're going to see on this De Soto expedition, there's a much less subjectivity, because at that point, They were
Hey,
just soldiers.
so when we hear historically, let's just take place in America.
Hmm.
When we mention a lot of these people, we can put a demographic or description or to these people. Not only that, we can put a height to these people. And so when we mention giants, we shouldn't think nothing spooky. We shouldn't think of cyclops and things with two rows of teeth. We should just think of at this time abnormally tall people. Right.
Yes. Now that's an important distinction because he does not go into crazy tales. He never says in nowhere in this story do you have magic, voodoo, superstition. You don't have mermaids, and however, it's actually some of the later expeditions that really fantasize some of the accounts. Why? Because at this time, in the 1530s, it was not a missionary expedition. They had no intent on converting these people. It was purely exploration. Now they did a lot of killing, and so I'm not trivializing this expedition, but they were not bloodthirsty and in the regard of converting people or killing them. They didn't travel with the intent of mass converting, which is where the later expeditions come in, where you have a lot of issues. And actually, prior to DeSoto, you had Navarez go into Florida, and he was committing terrible atrocities right off the bat. DeSoto, and this is all mainstream history, so remember, take this all with a grain of salt. But I'm trying to tell you guys, if you go right to the early beginnings of this mainstream history, there are many gems that slip through the cracks. He did not falsify any accounts. There's no exaggeration. Like I said, no mermaids. So when he says giants, he's not saying 6 fingers, 2 rows of teeth, which we can talk about another day. But he's talking about well-proportioned human beings. He goes as far to say beautiful, handsome, smart, like genius, well-proportioned people with a skill of oration, oratory skills that surpass the Caesars of Rome and the senators of Rome. So I guess we can start there. Let's start with an excerpt right here. You well know, he replied, that opinion is false, and one must disregard it, moreover, or it will be only right to destroy it by showing just what truth there is in it. And as you yourself have seen and known, there are Indians of very fine understanding who in peace and war, and in adverse and prosperous times, are able to speak like the people of any nation of much wisdom. These Indians did answer in substance what I have told you, and furthermore, they made many other magnificent speeches, which I do not recall, but which I would not be able to repeat, as they were said even if I should remember them. Nevertheless, these speeches were so eloquent that the governor and those who accompanied him were more surprised by the utterances of the Indians than they were by their having permitted themselves to swim almost 30 hours in the water. And when many Spaniards well read in history heard them, they asserted that the captains appeared to have been influenced by the most famous officers of Rome when that city dominated the world with its arms, and that the youths, who were lords of vassals, appeared to have been trained in Athens when it flourished in moral letters. Consequently, as soon as they responded, and the governor had embraced them, there was not a captain or a soldier of any importance who did not embrace them likewise. So this is talking about basically there was Indians that they fought who refused to surrender and swam for 30 hours. They tread water for 30 hours straight. 7-foot guys, probably wouldn't be that hard. And when they finally pulled them out of the water, exhausted, they gave a speech that, like, this isn't, like I said, not falsified. They were giving speeches, sometimes in fluent Castilian, because they'd taught themselves, this is also laid out in the book, that in the first expeditions, the natives, quote unquote natives, Aboriginals, had taught themselves Castilian Spanish after the first expeditions. And by the time 20 years later, when these expeditions, the DeSoto expedition, came through, many of the chiefs already had Castilian translators and lessons in Spanish. So they were able to give the greatest speeches some of these people had ever heard in their own language.
Let me ask you a
It
question.
would bring them to tears, is what it also says in this book, that the chiefs could bring the Spaniards to tears with their words.
You could hear me, Dr. Longo? Let me ask you a question about
Yes,
that, right?
yes, sir.
So
Sure.
check this out, right? All right, so look, it would be obvious that obviously the Moors that was in Spain and Portugal, or that was part of Al Andalusia, spoke Latin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they've been coming back and forth to America, what would be the possibility that Latin was also in America to begin with?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
And
no, continue.
it's in all of the areas. Like even when you see Charles V, right? Carlos
Mm-hmm.
Quinto. He's an Inca. He's an Inca emperor. You understand what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Yeah.
And so a lot of things that they saying is Spanish. I'm not gonna go and say a lot of people say it's Moorish, but that language itself was spoken by the people that was part of the Al Andalusian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
So if they
No.
came to Florida, where the architectural evidence lies, along with some other things that we can tie to it, it wouldn't be out of the regard that they are. I'm just saying that just to the sense of how he was saying that they learned that they were so educated, they learned Castilian Spanish. I'm assuming that they already spoke Spanish. I'm just saying. I mean, just
Yeah.
just an observation. But go ahead.
It's a good guess. Um, it's a good connection that they would have already known a father language to Spanish that would have helped them adopt it so quickly. Um, that's a good angle. Now, I just flipped, as you were speaking here, I flipped to another page that substantiates what you're seeing. What you're saying. On page 169 in book 2 of La Florida de la Inca, we have something that corroborates what you just said. And like I said, it's not always the language and the architecture that has the connection. Sometimes it's the food. The army thereupon crossed the river and traveled 2 leagues through a treeless land, coming eventually to a place where they found great fields of corn, beans, and a type of squash known in Spain as Roman squash. Roman squash in Florida. So that's a connection that someone had been going back and forth before. But just to talk about other things in this book, very early on, they were getting along with some tribes, DeSoto and his expedition, and this was about 1,000 people, like 1,300 people, about 350 horses, cannons, they had guns, right? They had dogs, they had Italian greyhounds. You had lots of things on this expedition. It was a very assorted cast. It wasn't just white dudes in a boat. As I said, you had Moors, Negroes, Inca, many different things on this expedition. So with this kind of melting pot, I think it was a lot harder for everyone to get behind a certain lie. If they were going to tell a lie, I think it would be easier to have everyone in the same boat with the same views, goals, which is what happened later when they would bring the monks who were batshit crazy about Christianity. Then you had a lot of the just downright massacring going on because you'd get into a lot of these convert or else situations. And we know that's a bit of the mainstream history too, so we won't get too deep into that. But when they would encounter some of these natives that were not so friendly, they would have skirmishes and battles, and they were having many battles. So right off the bat, we should also establish the bows of the Indians, the natives, the Aboriginals of Florida were so fine and so large that a average an average Spaniard could barely pull the string back. So they had so much trouble. They actually had to test their armor one time. They were wearing the finest chainmail that Spain could produce, that the upper class, because a lot of these conquistadors on the De Soto expedition, why the De Soto expedition was special was because they had just Spain had just accomplished a series of very successful expeditions. So they put a ton of resources into the De Soto expedition. I think it was about 9 ships or 7 ships. I think 7, and then 2 others went. One went off to Cuba, one went to Mexico, I think. But like I said, 1,000 men, dogs, all this good stuff. And when they make land and they start fighting, it's not just peasants and foot soldiers. It was mostly cavalrymen, hidalgos, as they were called. Hidalgos, the nobility of Florida. Sorry, the nobility of Spain. And they were bringing with them the finest armor that money could buy. Now, in the first couple battles, they were getting arrows passing fully through a horse. Arrows going straight through men that were wearing the finest armor on the planet. And the arrow tips made in Florida.
So in other words, armored piercing
yes.
arrows.
Yes. Not only were they armor piercing, the men behind the bows were, like I said, 7 foot on it. 6'6" would be the low end of the Floridians. 7 foot would be much more in line with the average because the queens were about 7 feet. The kings were up to 10 feet, as we're going to get into. This is no exaggeration. And we would still have the bones today to prove this if the Smithsonian had not put them all behind closed doors, because this was established fact even up until the 1920s, that you had giant bones in Florida. Dare I say, a land of giants.
Just to confirm, you said the Smithsonian has tons of skeleton bones of the indigenous peoples that they hid away.
Oh, thousands, if they haven't destroyed them all. But yeah, so here I have another earmark that I just wrote, invincible, because they were encountering natives that could take multiple gunshots, stabs with a spear. They were lancing people with kind of like these jousting spears off the top of a horse, and they would have lances go straight through an Indian, and then they would turn around and start fighting back as if nothing, didn't even bother them. So they were blown away by the physical prowess of these people and their ability to make bows. There wasn't a single bow that wasn't dyed neon pink, neon green, neon blue, seriously, neon orange, purple, black, red, you name it. It was considered very low to have just a wooden bow. So these bows were kind of like your Lamborghini. These were like the Lamborghinis of bows. Not only was the string tension like 10 times what you'd find in like England or something on these bows. When they lined up their armor, like I said, their armor was so vulnerable, they had to test it, and they said, what the hell, why is it just they're so strong? What is it? They tested their armor like you would at a gun range, and they were trying to pull the bows, and they were getting some shots with the bow and getting it to hit, and it wasn't going through. Well, then they released one of their prisoners who was an Aboriginal. He picks up the bow, pulls it, lets go. It goes clean through both sides of the mail. So chainmail and plate armor. It goes straight through. That's a reed arrow. A reed arrow. Not that strong, but so much force, and the tips were so well made that they could go straight through a human, which the Spaniards had never seen like that. Okay, they were used to riding into combat and getting dusted with arrows, and it was no big deal. You know, you break them off and you keep fighting. Now, when they were in Florida, they were quite literally terrified at any given second. And in this book, it says they never let them sleep. If any man ventured or straggled too far behind, an arrow through the chest immediately. Now, so let's not talk about that too much. There's many other good things in this book, but sorcery. But here's a good one. I've talked about this a little before. When they were heading north on this expedition, and they started entering some of the royal cities, if you could call them that, with temples, with queens, with jewels, pearls. They were met with a lady, okay? And this name's hard to pronounce, but they went to a area which is believed to be about South Carolina today. So, like I said, they were calling it Florida at the time, but today it would be around South Carolina. Well, when they were on this expedition, they came to this city and they made peace with a certain tribe. And when the Spaniards and their group entered the city, they were treated very, very kindly. Okay. Now, the queen, the princess of this city, of this town, was 7 feet tall. And when they saw her being ferried across the waters, it was being done in a boat, in a ceremonial boat that was bringing her from one side of a lake to another. And this boat, they say, was precisely like a procession that would be done in Egypt, where the goddess or the princess, you name it, the matriarch would be brought.
Can we get a name of this? Can we get a name of this queen by any chance? Just a couple of viewers asking just by chance.
Sure. Now it's a tough one to pronounce, so let me get it in front of me. But her name was Kofa Chikwi. Kofa Chikwi. It's either Kofa Chikwi or sometimes online. That's in the book. Sometimes online you'll see it. Kofa Chikwi. But Kofa Chikwi. And this is in the town of Juala. Xuala. In modern day South Carolina, which at the time was called La Florida by the Spanish. So the Senora of Kofa Chikwi, 7 feet tall and rich, like very rich. Her jewels, her temples, all of it. The Spaniards say, and here, let's see, I think I have.
So for a 7 foot tall Aboriginal woman with filthy wealth.
Yes. Now, here, let me see if I can get.
Hey man, I need everybody in the chat to drop a fire emoji. Dr. Longo going in. I can't wait to see what A1 is going to piggyback right off of this with, man. So, hey, drop a fire emoji in the chat, man. We going in.
So you have the temple and kind of the ceremonial complex in this town or just outside of this town that they're going to for the ceremony is called Taulomeko or Tolomeko. So Tolomeko. There's your Mecca. There's your Mexico. There's your Olmec. There's your all these connections. Tolomeko. In the book, it's written as Taulomeko. Taulo is a Norse god. You have Tallahassee.
That's a great correlation. Now I'm gonna ask you, in this location, is there any structure of significance of notice before we move on?
Yes.
Is there any mechanic or geometry work from this?
Yes. Here. Now I have. Let's pull up. I've got.
Also, you guys, if you enjoying it, guys, in the live stream, man, share the live stream. If you guys want to support the channel, Cash App and PayPal information is at the bottom of the screen. Hey, we 2 for 2 today. It's the second live stream, and there's some heat right here too, man. It's a heavyweight jam.
Okay, can you guys see this? Here we have the Lady
Yep.
of Kofa Tachikwi. It's either Kofa Chikwi or Kofa Techekwi. Either way, it's pretty tough one to pronounce. But so this is, you see her being depicted pretty large right here. I'm not sure if that's just like a artistic.
She looks like one of the Aboriginal chiefs today named Chief Warhorse. She looks just like Chief Warhorse. What you think, A1?
Yeah.
Well,
Let me see. Hold. Go back. Let me see that one more time.
no, this is like a mainstream depiction, but it's still
Exactly.
So another thing about these peoples is these were heavily agricultural people. That's a sign of civilization. Probably the most important precursor to civilization, necessity to civilization, agriculture. And these people had a lot of corn. Now, I'm going to flip through these. Here you have DeSoto. That's DeSoto on the left. This is the Lady of Kofa Chikwi. There, she's painted as smaller than DeSoto. This is not true. She was much, much, much larger. So let's flip through some of these. Here we have Cusco, right? Peru, Pizarro. And then down here, and the reason they're next to each other is because of the similarity.
Go back just a little bit. Who built them structures in Peru that we see back here? I just gotta ask those questions because there was some nice fucking structures back there.
Yeah, and you notice how Greco-Roman they look. It's not just kind of the Peruvian we only see today. This would also be including some of the Capitol buildings and stuff we see today. Not just the sites that are labeled as ancient. They do this double standard where if you can get a government building in there soon enough and repair it soon enough, they'll call it a very recent building.
And that's why I want to reiterate, guys, when we tell you guys all the time, we go into this research that Dr. Longo goes into, and we show you these historical buildings like your downtown municipal building or your or Newark postal office or whatnot. These are structures that have been around probably for thousands of years.
Oh yeah, New York City, Chicago, Detroit, Jacksonville, Tallahassee. These have been on the map for thousands of years.
What would thousands of years? What type of concrete would they been built out of?
Now, in Peru, I don't know. I'm not well versed. Haven't done enough research to know what most of those buildings are made out of. I would say that in Florida, just about everything, especially in South Florida, is made out of limestone. So either oolitic limestone, Miami oolitic limestone, which is very, very white, like bleached white, or coquina rock, which is in northeast Florida. That's the stronger stuff. That's the what the star forts and those things are made out of, the castles in St. Augustine.
What's that? Calcium oxide? That's another name for it.
I don't know. See, that goes over my head a little bit. I don't know the chemical composition.
Where do you think that originated from, like, according to your research, like from what you see, like, you know what I'm saying? Where do you think it came from, Europe, or you think like where do you think that style of building or construction came from?
This is an Atlantean structure. I think a lot of people go wrong where they'll say it came from one continent to the other, but Atlantis to me largely means North and South America, which the breadbasket, the real cradle of civilization, is the Gulf of Mexico. So to me, it would only make sense the arts and the sciences. Now, I always go back to the North Pole because originally All mankind goes back to the North Pole. Long, long, long before the white man, the yellow man, was on this planet. Melanated people lived in and around the North Pole as well. And it is there that all mankind comes from. However, after the Ice Age, due to the Gulf Stream, after all these ice ages, it's the Gulf of Mexico that bounces back to 100% after a flood, after an ice age. The Gulf of Mexico bounces back to 100%, the fastest. This is because of the Gulf Stream. This is because of the springs in Florida and the springs in the Yucatan. And this, so, it's funny we're talking about the limestone. Why is the limestone so special? Well, all of the northern hemisphere has been shaved clean of its limestone. This is kind of how we know a ice age happened, is granite. You have glaciers that shaved the limestone away, because most coastal land is supposed to be limestone. It's shells that have been washed up for millions of years and, compacted into this wonderful stone, spongy stone that all of Florida and most of Yucatan Peninsula and the Caribbean and all this is made out of. Well, why is it so special? It tells you what areas survived cataclysm and destruction. And when you have an area completely made out of limestone, you can be pretty sure that there has been no substantial seismic activity, volcanic activity, tsunami activity. And this again substantiates the idea that the Gulf of Mexico is a cradle of civilization, because cradle does not necessarily mean starting point. It does mean starting point, but it means cradle, to be protected, to be nurtured in. And that's what the Gulf of Mexico is. But any other things you guys want to touch
Yeah, I
on?
mean, technically, the Gulf of Mexico is almost an enclosed circle, if you will.
Right.
Oh, so yeah.
Oh, I got one for you real quick. Hold up.
Sure.
All right, you know what? Let me just give me 1 second.
Hey, drop them fire emojis in the chat if you guys are enjoying the live stream, man. I want to make sure you guys are all right out there. Drop a fire emoji. Let A1, let Dr. Longo let us know that you're enjoying the live stream. Support the channel, share it, tell a friend, tell a friend. Decoding ancient history, man, right now live.
So check this out. Limestone, for example, right? So let me see.
Nice.
I'm muted. I muted myself. Hold up. All right. So boom, this American Indian Encyclopedia, right?
Yeah.
So this is the title right here, dealing with concrete. All right. So I'm gonna blow it back up. So it said concrete. 300 BC to 300 AD, Mesoamerican culture, concrete, concrete or gravel, lime
Wow.
and water is
Wow.
used in construction projects. Include look, check it out, including buildings and roads. Because of the lime, the concrete is more durable than adobe. The Mayan who culture arose in Mesoamerica are the first indigenous American to make concrete, inventing it independently of the Egyptians and the Romans during the late pre-classic period
Wow.
of their cultural development, which lasted from, like we mentioned, 300 BC to 300 AD. The Mayan used concrete as mortars to adhere blocks to each other, and plaster or stucco, a thicker version of plaster to cover the stone or adobe surfaces in the masonry projects and in their art. They call this plaster suckby. The Mayan used stucco in their sculptures as well. So it's a sea stone masonry techniques, right? But then it goes down further and it talks more about the limestone, right? It says lime, calcium oxide. Mayan builders mix dry powder, calcium, and clay with water, sand, gravel, and crushed stone. So they kind of talk about like they actually talk about it all kind of through this book, but just to let you know that, they said that they was already doing construction with limestone already.
Oh
So I
yeah,
just wanted to just add
that's
that to you.
that's a great one. Thank you, Edwin. I have not seen that, and I'm gonna have to use that myself now. That's a
No,
really, really
definitely.
good
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, that's why I wanted to
resource.
get in last time. Yeah, yeah. It's in there. It's a lot of stuff that's actually in this encyclopedia, and it's supported by
Wow.
sources. It's just not like something that people came up with. It actually has some very good quality sources. But yeah, the lime. That's why I said like. So now we got evidence that we was already using lime over here,
Yes.
and then it said
Now.
the Mayans. We
Uh
keep
huh.
talking about Miami. And we
Yep.
keep talking about we finding the Mayans there, but we thinking the Mayans is traveling there. No, the Mayans and these cultures is probably among the Timical because you mentioned another name that let me see, you mentioned another name earlier. I think you said the Talamaco, the
Oh
Talameco.
wow. Wow. Man,
So
you
this is
got
a
it
book
on.
right.
You got one in the holster. That's crazy.
Yeah, man. I mean, like I said, a lot of this stuff you keep mental notes until
Oh
you
my
actually
god.
find information that you know what I'm saying that you actually can add on to it, right? But this is called hold up, damn, let me see.
Wow.
This is
How did you
called
get that? How did you get that up so quick, man?
what
Man,
this? When you said Talameco, I remember reading about the Talameco in this book. And the Talameco, like this Peru, Mexico. But when you get into the Talameco is like actually in that same area. But then they start talking about Florida.
Yes. Yes. It's crazy because it starts. You could almost make the case that some of these Peruvians were guides to the Spanish, not just buddies that they were using for soldiers. That they had some inside knowledge and were worth bringing to Florida to find another Talameco.
hmm So,
Wow.
I mean, it's a lot of
Now
correlations. Now, go ahead.
now, would you guys like to have your mind blown? I'm
Yeah,
gonna do my
get with it.
best here. Okay, you guys ready?
Well, I'm gonna stop sharing. Go ahead.
Now, do you know what Peru is backwards? Here's a kicker. Do you know what Peru is backwards? Europe. Europe. Isn't that crazy? Peru
Europe,
backwards. Europe.
Europe, Europe, Europe. Yeah, 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 yeah.
And we all
Europe.
know how many words get flipped backwards when people cross the Atlantic Ocean. Many, many words get flipped. For example, Mabilla, Mobile, Alabama, comes from Mabilla. Mabilla is also where we get the word Alabama because Mabilla is Alabama backwards. Mabilla, Alabama, Mabilla, Alabama. So a lot of times, if has anyone ever heard the word pig Latin?
Yeah,
Well, what were
pig
the
Latin.
what were the Spanish responsible for bringing into the Americas? Pigs in Latin, right?
hmm
Which involves not entirely. It's more a swapping system, but many words were flipped, mirrored backwards once the Europeans arrived. Peru being a good example. Peru, Europe, but I'd like to read you guys. I was showing. Could I show my that temple of Talameco here for a sec. This is Tolomeco in this picture, but in the book it is Taulomeco, precisely like you just showed. Now, why this was so noteworthy? This is in many of the conquistadors' words.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is in Peru, right?
No, this is in Florida. This is in
Oh.
maybe South Carolina, but at this time this was the Florida territory. Or it
Now I'm
was.
looking in the back, right? If you
Yep.
look in the back, you see statues,
I,
like of
I
some
have,
type of figures.
would you like to hear all about those statues and
All right,
why they're so
go ahead.
special?
I'm just going to rock off for you. I was thinking about the Tomek,
Totec, the
the
Totec,
Totec, and
Yeah.
Shay people.
Now,
Shay.
Tolomeco is almost a combination of the words
Old
Toltec
Mac and
and Olmec.
Totec.
Right. Tolomeco. You also have Mexico in there, or Meso, or Mecca, if you really want to bend it. But here I can read about this temple. And this temple, they were instructed to go to this temple by the lady Cofachiqui, or they went to this temple right before the lady Cofachiqui. Now, this temple, which is not standing today, they don't know where it was. The mainstream's not very interested. Well, I'll just read it, and you guys will get an idea. So on page 316, over the roof of the temple, many large and small shells of different marine animals had been arranged. The Spaniards did not learn how they had brought inland, but it may be that they too are produced in the rivers of that land which are so numerous and so full of water. These shells had been placed with the inside out so as to show their great luster, and they included many conch shells of strange magnificence. Between them, spaces had been left, for each hadn't been placed in its particular order and count. Blah blah blah. In these spaces were large strands, some of pearls and some of seed pearls, half a fathom in length, which hung from the roof, pearls descending from the roof. This place was so decked out. Half a fathom in length, which hung from the roof and descended in a graduated manner, so that where some left off, others began. The temple was covered on the outside with all these things, and they made a splendid sight in the brilliance of the sun. To enter the temple, they opened some large doors, which were in proportion to the size of the building. Close to those portals were 12 giants, carved in wood and copied from life with so much ferocity and vigor of posture that the Castilians, which means Spanish, Castilians were paused and took a stand where they might examine them with care. And they were amazed to discover in such barbarous lands work which would have been prized exceedingly, both for their grandeur and perfection, had they been found in the most famous temples of Rome. Psst, psst. Hey, Raven, can you fill up my water, please? Thank you. Thank you. The most famous temples of Rome. They're saying if these statues were exhibited in Rome, they would be withheld with the utmost, splendor. These were so splendid, so amazing, so brilliant that the Spaniards were jaw-dropped when they saw these, not to mention all of the pearls. Now, the reason that they left this place and continued was because there was no gold. But I'll get into why they didn't find any gold. The natives were likely very smart, and I know they were. And there's theories that when they knew the Spanish were coming, they smelted all of their gold into their brass. So they would hide their gold in their brass. So when the Spaniards would come and find brass dishes, brass this, brass, they would say, oh, it's brass, and they would just move on. Now, brass itself was significant, or bronze. And we're going to get into these giants and the weapons that they had. So I'll continue reading. Their grandeur and perfection had they been found in the most famous temples of Rome at the time of its greatest strength and empire. These giants were placed so as to guard and defend the entrance against those who might wish to come through it. 6 were stationed on each side, one standing behind the other, and all descending gradually, from the largest to the smallest. For the first were 4 yards high, 4 yards, 12 feet. The second were somewhat less, and so on down to the least. Or so on down to the last, sorry. In their hands, these giants bore various weapons, made in proportion to their bodies. The first 2, which were the largest, stood on opposite sides, and carried massive clubs, the upper fourth of which was spiked with diamond points, and trimmed with strips of copper. Copper. That's going to be very significant. They were constructed exactly like those seen in paintings of Hercules, and it would seem that they were copied from these paintings, or vice versa. The giants held them upraised in both hands, as if threatening to strike whoever might enter the door, and their gesture was so ferocious and so savage as to cause fright. The second giants, which likewise stood opposite each other, for this is the arrangement they all followed, carried broadswords made of wood in the same shape as those made in Spain, of iron and steel. The third had sticks 1.5 fathoms in length, which were unlike clubs, and more in the manner of small swingles used to break flax. The first 2/3 of them being round at the end, widening little by little, blah, 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 the shape of a shovel, those weapons were. The fourth group in the line held large battle axes, which were in conformity with their own stature. One of these weapons had a head of brass, with a long and well-constructed blade, on the back of which was a 4-cornered point, a handbreadth in length. The other had a head with exactly the same point and blade, but to the greater amazement of and admiration of the Spaniards, it was made of flint. The 5th giants, in turn, held bows, which were the length of their bodies, and which were arched with arrows placed as if they were shooting them. Both bows and arrows showed the extreme neatness and perfection that those Indians possess in making them. One arrow had a head of deer horn, carved with 4 sides, and the other a head of flint, blah, 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 which was in size like an ordinary dagger. The 6th and last of the giants carried very large and beautiful pikes with blades of copper. So stop here. All of the weapons that were just mentioned are not the weapons being used by the more or less Asiatic natives who may have moved in around the 1500s or just prior to the 1500s, who were largely using flint weaponry. Flint, like rock, you know? Now, those people, and you can see any Indian movie, what do they show you? Asiatic peoples using flint tools. They don't even have knives. They don't even have blades. They don't even have, good tipped arrowheads. It's all rock.
Right.
It's all rock. And this is why the arrows of the Floridians was very significant too. The arrowheads of the Floridians were so well made that they were, like you said, armored piercing. There's an instance in this book where an arrow was let loose by a native that hit a horse and blew its leg off. And it was dangling by a thread, its leg. Now,
That's crazy.
this is highly, highly geniusly engineered weaponry. And in the temples that we just described, these weapons are made of copper. Only one of the weapons was made of flint. And if I had to guess, that would be a replacement. Whereas you had copper, bronze, or brass weaponry that is superior to the quote unquote technology, the flint rock that you see natives being depicted with. So these weapons are very significant. And if you remember at the beginning of the paragraph, it says, copied precisely from Hercules. Hercules' club was being wielded by American giants. Now that makes a lot of sense. But what else? Swords. The natives did not use swords. So, or at least the natives that were warring with the Spanish, or at least the accounts that were given, they were using flint weapons, clubs with little shark teeth sticking out of them, stuff like that. The weapons just described are fine weaponry. Not to use European as like a standard, but on par with the weapons of Europe. That's why they were so amazed when they had found them. They were finding weapons that don't belong in Florida. Well, let's keep moving. The ceiling of the temple from the walls upward was adorned like the roof outside, which designs of shells interspersed with strands of pearls and seed pearls were stretched so as to adhere to and follow the contour of the roof. Among these decorations were great headdresses of different colors of feathers, such as those made for wear, and in addition to the pearls stretched out along the ceiling, and the feathers nailed to it, there were many others which had been suspended by some thin, soft-colored strings. Blah blah blah. So it's amazing, and the queen actually told the Spaniards they could each take as much as they could carry from this house. And when they each had done so, and probably tried to sneak in a little more too, it had not even made a dent in the piles of riches in this temple. And there was no gold in this temple, though. No gold, which is why the Spaniards kept moving. But that was likely on the intelligence of the natives, who knew if the Spaniards found gold, it would be a lot different of a story. So, but here, let's go, so they go into this temple, magnificent temple, giants, weaponry. Well, then they move on and they get to meet the queen, the lady of Cofachiqui, right? Well, when they met her, you guys are going to like this, right? When they met her, she was very nice. She treated them with, gifts, food, riches. They talked about peace. They talked about her enemies. They talked about this and that. And this is the mainstream, I'm not pretending like I was there, but what we're getting at is when this is the kingdom of Appalachia, by the way, the kingdom of Appalachia. So you say Timucua, this is very well would have encompassed the Timucua, the Creek, Choctaw. They use the word Choctaw in this book as well. Tula, like Alabama, Oklahoma natives, many places. But when they met this queen, like I said, she was tall. Well, they had a wonderful time, and I'm trying to look for the spot I'm going to read. They had a wonderful time. They partied, they fed, and then they were going to leave on their way, right? Well, when they were leaving this queen, and let me go to these other, here's another picture. This is the procession that I told you about earlier, and look at this skin color on these people. I mean, that's a white piece of clothing. There's the white skin in the background on the conquistadors.
Hey, real quick.
Sure.
That looked like a canal boat. That looked like a boat that, like, you see in canals.
Yep, like Venice, right? A gondola.
Exactly.
Gondola,
When
yeah.
you go in the World's Fair, they got canals with them same boats in them.
Oh, yeah. And the queen would be ferried on one of these boats. And all of this was done purely for extravagance or ritual or splendor. These people were not just hunter-gatherer. They weren't just worried about fighting and protecting all day. These people had a rich society. These people took care of their wounded, their crippled, you have evidence of cripples living in Florida into the 70 years old, 80 years old. Now, oh, and by the way, the Temuco were living 300 years old, but that's not really discussed in this book. That I think we talked about that last time I've been on the show. We talked about the 300-year-old, but we're not going to be talking about any age today, but that's certainly an important angle because of the healing properties of this area as well. It's not just an origin of much of humanity. It's a nurturing location for humanity, a healing place, Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, the springs of the Yucatan Peninsula. This is where Rockefeller, Edison, Ford, Flagler, Plant, all of them, how many presidents, Kennedy, all these people went down to Florida to help their health later in life, to get healthy again, go down to Florida. But let's keep talking. Lady of Cofachiqui and the Temple Mound. So they met on top of a large mound complex, a high bluff in present-day South Carolina. This is one interpretation. Now, of course, that's a very Eurocentric, more Pocahontas style depiction. But what's trying to be depicted here is her beauty. This woman was so beautiful. You ever seen Lord of the Rings when the queen was so beautiful they couldn't even look her in the eye? This is how beautiful and well proportioned. I guess that's how they would say curvy, thick, sexy. She was smoking hot, and she didn't rule through terror. She ruled through grace, wisdom, beauty. That she too was an orator with great skill. There's some other depictions of what she looked like this. And these are all mainstream, so this is kind of the best we can do. But here's where it gets important. Now, the Lady of Cofachiqui, when the Spaniards left with their treasure that she had given them, and as I said, the Spaniards were traveling with Moors or Berbers in their unit, Negroes, different people serving alongside the Spaniards and the Italians. Well, interestingly, here we go. Okay, chapter XX, page 333. We have already told how the governor and his army had left Juala and traveled for 5 days through the wilderness, which they encountered before reading Guashula. But turning back in our story, I must inform you that on the same day that they departed from the town of Juala, they missed 3 slaves who had fled during the previous night. 2 of them, who were of Negro blood, doesn't say African, but Negro blood, were servants of Captain Andres de Vasconcelos de Silva, whereas the 3rd, who was a Moor from Barbary, belonged to Don Carlos Enriquez, a previously mentioned cavalier, who was a native of Xerez de Badajoz. It was believed that the flight of those men and their desire to remain among the Indians was a result of an affection for women rather than anything else. And although the Spaniards made an effort to recapture them, they could not do so, for in general, it pleased the Indians of this great kingdom, as we shall see more clearly later, to have the people of the Spaniards remain with them. Such evil behavior on the part of the Negroes caused amazement because they were considered to be good Christians and friends of their master. But of the Moor, it came as no surprise and rather confirmed the opinion always held that he was a very malicious man in every other respect. Now, what's very interesting is what they leave out on this page, but put into the footnotes. In the footnotes of this page, they talk about it wasn't just any woman that these slaves, quote unquote slaves, Negroes, were staying back for. Guess what happened when the Spaniards kept going and those couple melanated people who they left behind? According to the El Vaz account, the governor afterward received a report that the lady of Cofachiqui and one of the escaped slaves of Andres de Vasconcelos were living as man and wife. So, why is it that the quote unquote Negro slave who is left behind within days is now essentially the king of this area because he has won the affection of the queen, of the Lady of Cofachiqui? Now, isn't that something? Of all the people that the Lady of Cofachiqui could have chosen, of Henry de Soto, if she wanted a husband so bad, why not choose Henry de Soto? What was it that made her choose one of the Negroes or the Moor or whatever term you'd like to use? Why one of them and not the Spanish? And why didn't? And actually, it goes into a little in more depth. They try and get the guy back, right? They try and get the guy back, and they refuse to send them back. They refuse to send the guy back. So, what do you guys think about that?
That's interesting. Interesting. A1. Oh, I think it's my rule.
That's all right.
Hey man, what y'all think about that in the chat though? That is
So
the
queen of Cofachiqui, Talameco, this kingdom, she chose to marry one of the melanated peoples that the Spanish had brought with them when they entered Florida. Just a very strange connection. It's almost like there was those three quote unquote slaves or Negroes had a connection to that land or a connection to those people. And as I said, nowhere in the book does it say.
And that was a way for them to get free or some shit. Yeah, that's some dope shit.
Nowhere in the book does it say that they're African Negroes. It just calls them Negroes. And the queen certainly had an affinity for them. So, but there's more, much more in this book. And really the real nail in the coffin. Some other interesting things.
Yeah, that book is heavy. That's but there's like one of many. Like there's so many books you're gonna find. It's hard to kind of read all of them, but it's ways to go through them. You know what I'm saying, and find the content. But that was a deep book right there. I like that one.
So we've got many different things. I'm going to flip through. I'm not even halfway through, I don't think, with the footnotes or the tags that I've made. But let's talk about the giants, okay? The tall people. Now, as they made their way from that place, and, they had to leave back the black people, the colored people, with the queen, because now he's the king, right? Funny enough. Well, as they kept moving through different territories, and they were entering new lands with new peoples, they were going through, and they eventually made it to modern day Tuscaloosa, right? Tuscaloosa, named after the king, or the cacique, as they called them, cacique. You have casino, casina is the black drink, and then cacique is the name of the chief that they would call. Very similar to Caesar, by the way. If you know, it's almost descended from the same exact root, cacique, Caesar, or Khazar, Caesar, whatever. So Tuscaloosa is a chief, and it's a son and a father, and they both go by the name Tuscaloosa, or in this book, Tascaloosa. So Tuscaloosa comes from Tascaloosa. And this chief, Chief Tascaloosa, let me pull up some pictures of him. I think I have. Yes, so here's a pretty decent depiction. Of course, it's not perfect. But what you see here is the height difference. This height difference is supremely underestimated and understated. In this book, I'll just have to read it. The physical measurements of Tascaloosa were like those of his son, for both were more than a half-yard taller than all others. And he's saying half-yard taller than the other natives. So if the natives are about 7 feet, and this guy's a half-yard, if not more, taller, they go on to say that when he was standing, a 6-foot man could only come to his waist. That makes this guy 9 feet, 10 feet. 10 feet, it seems to be the consensus that they have at the end of this book. But when they would meet in a field, it was so inconvenient for this guy to have to look down and talk to people that when they would meet in a formal setting, they would put a giant throne or like a stool down in the field, like a battlefield almost, where they would meet. And they would get around him, and everyone would be standing, but he would be sitting, and he would be still rising above all the people standing around him. So, also, here's a very significant part. Quite close to the chieftain, a standard bearer carried a great chamois banner, which was yellow with 3 blue bands separating one part of it from another, and which was made in the same shape and form as the banners borne by troops of cavalrymen in Spain. So when they met these natives in a military capacity, they weren't fighting, but it was like a regalia where they all dress up and do like a show coming into town. All his soldiers are there making a show. All the conquistadors are there making a show. And it's almost like a military parade. When they did this, the natives had European standards or like a flag. You know how Europeans would go into battle in the Renaissance or 1700s, 1800s, and someone would be holding the flag, right? Well, these natives, these Aboriginals, had a European style standard or flag that had like the crest of the royal family, which these Spaniards were amazed to see. This was, again, this is not just people who fight by throwing rocks and sticks at each other. This was highly, highly refined society. And their approach to warfare was not just barbaric. It was also, there was an aesthetic to it. There was grace to it. And that's the distinction to be made here. But let's see what else they had. They talk about his size. Back to the chief Tuscaloosa. His countenance was handsome, and he wore a look of severity, yet a look which well revealed his ferocity and grandeur of spirit. His shoulders conformed to his height, and his waistline measured just a little more than two-thirds of a yard. His arms and legs were straight and well formed, and were in proper proportion to the rest of his body. In sum, he was the tallest and most handsomely shaped Indian that the Castilians saw during all their travels in Florida. And by Florida, they mean America. So that's Chief Tascaloosa. And so yeah, Chief Tascaloosa, about 10 feet tall. And here's another depiction. He would be put up on a throne too, him or his son. But this is very understated, this picture here. And of course, this is not the right phenotype you would have been seeing, because at this point we're getting closer and closer in the expedition to the Mississippi River. And you know me, I'm all about the Florida, Mississippi River, Yucatan, the Gulf of Mexico area being this fertile breadbasket. Well, in this book, as they get closer and closer to the Mississippi, the people get darker and darker skinned, and that is explicitly stated in this book. So some of the Florida natives had paler skin, especially on the eastern coast. When they moved closer to the Mississippi, the skin was so dark, they said that it was darker than Ethiopians. And at that time, Ethiopia meant all of Africa, roughly, not completely. But Ethiopian was the word they were using for the darkest people on the planet. You had Mississippians that were that dark, and I'll skip to that part. But also we have skull binding going on. Skull binding. Now, here. So later on this expedition, they come across skull binding, elongated skulls. These were not just any normal elongated skull. Now you see the elongated skulls here, right? Here you have Paracas style skulls from Peru, a African elongated skull. This is France, if I'm not mistaken. There's actually a town in France where they were still skull binding until very, very recently, only 100 years ago. Well, you have Maya, Akan, Olmec, Syria, same skull. And, I'm not saying it's skull binding. Obviously, that's another debate, is that, yes, people were skull binding, but they were doing so in imitation of something that was naturally like that, had a naturally elongated skull. Well, most people don't know. And of course, here's a Maya nobleman with his elongated skull. Paracas skulls on the right there. Egyptian style elongated skull. Argentina on the bottom right. Hopi, so that's United States, a Hopi Indian on the top there. And here's more of a European style. This is actually Eurasia. I think it's like Uzbekistan or something, one of those weird countries in the middle of nowhere. But it wasn't, this was being done by many different races, groups. Now, here you have Maya, and this is kind of the technique they would have been doing to bind the skulls. And I'll state it again. I'm not saying that all elongated skulls were made by binding, but the binding was done to imitate something that had been here before, with a longer skull, a longer posterior to the skull, so it comes back farther. But most people don't know these type of skulls have been found in Florida. And in the book, they encounter a tribe who not binded, but had elongated skulls. Now, someone's outside making noise. What's so significant about these skulls? Now, this one I'm showing you is Northwest Florida. Gulf Coast, of course. But this is the best I can do to show you. What's described in the book, however, is much longer than this, much more elongated. In the book, I kid you not, 1530s, they encountered people in the Tula tribe. So this tribe was going by the name Tula. So if I had to guess, this would be Oklahoma or Alabama area. The Tula had heads that were 3 feet long. 3 feet long. Okay, most people have a foot long head is a big, tall, long head. That's a giant skull. What type of person has a 3-foot tall head? That's unbelievable. This is a foot. This is a foot and a half, maybe. This is, those really long ones might be 2 feet at most. What does a 3-foot head look like? And I guarantee you, this wouldn't have gotten written down if they didn't see it. This man had a reputation to save. He did not exaggerate. As I said, this was an Inca. He was glorifying the natives of Florida out of respect for them because he had shared in what had happened to them when the Spanish came into his country. So he had seen history being lost. He was not writing from their perspective or to the benefit of the Spanish. So that's why so much of this makes it through in this book. And guys, there's not many books that you can get hardcover like this that were originally printed in the late 1500s. So if you're going to look for any mainstream history, this is one of the best resources you can have right here. Now, with the elongated skulls, this skull was found in Florida. This is a Peruvian skull, a Paracas skull. Now, what's interesting is that, remember, Inca come from Peru. This is what we're talking about. The Inca and Florida and the connections between the two. See this house in Central Florida? This house is in Central Florida. And they were building a pool in the backyard, excavating for a pool, right? Well, guess what they found underneath when they were excavating? They found 2 skulls, Peruvian skulls. Winter Garden, Florida. In January, a plumber installing pump pipes for an in-ground pool in the backyard of a 1-year-old house in Winter Garden. 1-year-old house. So imagine what's under the house, right, that they didn't get to find. Florida found a piece of bone in the sand. He reported it to the police, who brought the fragment to Orange Osceola County medical examiner, Dr. Jan Garavaglia. She determined that the bone had come from the face of a child of around 10 years. There was some mummified tissue still attached to the bone, which concerned her because most archaeological remains are devoid of any tissue. She informed the police that there might be a recently dead child illegally buried on the worksite. University of Central Florida archaeologist Dr. John Schultz worked with the forensics blah blah blah. They didn't find the remains of a murdered child, but they did find 2 crania and a dozen shards of pottery, bits of newspaper from 1978, textiles including an embroidered purse still carrying woven slings, blah blah blah. When Garavaglia x-rayed the skulls, she and Dr. Schultz were able to confirm that they were at least hundreds of years old. The skulls belonged to an adult male and child, and they both had Inca bones, a triangular intraparietal bone that sometimes develops where the posterior fontanelle used to be. It's not exclusive to them, but it's highly characteristic of Peruvian mummies, particularly Andean Inca tribes between 1200 and 1597 AD. Researchers identified the style of pottery and textiles as coming from the Chanque culture of coastal Peru. Their dates are in keeping with the Inca bone period between 1200 and 1470 AD. Blah, 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 lots of stuff. Basically, they go on to say that, these must have been brought over by a migrant worker. So like a recent Peruvian immigrant to the United States who just dropped it on the ground and then they built a house over it. Now, I don't believe that. I'm not buying that. And by Peruvian, you can kind of infer what they're describing is elongated. Now, here's 3 of the skulls. Let's take a look at them. This one's pretty hard to tell. This one the angle's not very good. But look at this one. That looks like a football, not a skull. You see how long that is? So they don't explicitly say elongated, but by saying Peruvian skull with a special type of bone inside of it, they're indirectly saying elongated. And this is the house. This is a real house. That's the pottery. Those are the 3 skulls right there. And some reports say 2 skulls, some said 3, so it's interesting. But yeah, who were the original skull binders? I think we can safely say it was probably in the Americas. But I thought that was interesting. The 3-foot head. They said that these people, who were some of the most warlike they had ever met, were 3 feet tall head. A yard. They said a yard long.
Yeah, that's some Jimmy Neutron shit, right? Seriously, like a big ass head, but nah, you find them long heads down here, and it brings me to the little funny movie that they had out, the cone heads, which who
Right.
had abnormally elongated head. But yeah, man, that's some heat right there. Hey, well, what you think about them elongated heads? You know, you find that same thing in Egypt with Nefertiti, uh, and various other Egyptian figures. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Now, I was recently thrift shopping here in Lake Worth, Florida. You know, I sent you the video of the Moorish lamps, the black Amor lamps in the window of the store right down the block here. Well, it wasn't the same store, but right down the street, I was thrift shopping, and you won't believe what I found. I found a figurine, and of course they're going to say this is Egyptian style figurine. But what this is a elongated skull. An elongated skull figurine. I know it's hard to see with the light, but right here, see if it'll. That is an Egyptian hieroglyph. And you have on the sides here, you have like a Eye of Ra type deal with the tattoos coming off the side, so you can tell it's Egyptian style. But what was this doing in a Florida thrift store? And what, you know, his nose is a little broken, but this thing was dirt cheap, right? This was like $1.99, and this thing's heavy. So was this a family who brought this over? Was this
And the
someone who
nose, and the nose is broke off. You mean?
the nose is broken off? Yeah, it's half broken off. Can't really see. There, you can see a little bit.
Mm-mm-mm.
But yeah, and it's
Now you
not just
going in, sir.
elongated. It's a fat skull too. It's fat. It's like a double skull in the back. Gets skinnier down towards the front. But yeah. So I just found that. I thought that was interesting. And I'll get to the end of this book. Some of the last notable things. They also talk about the flooding of the Mississippi. How the Mississippi would flood, not randomly, but the shamans and the wise, I think it was a woman actually, a wise woman that had been consulted on this expedition, told them, this is like a soothsayer or like a medicine woman, told them the Mississippi floods every 14 years, and that the day of this expedition, or the year of this expedition, was the 14th year, and that they should expect a flood. And they all laughed her off. They scoffed. They thought it was funny. Well, at the end of this year, the Mississippi flooded. This was not in the middle of the DeSoto expedition. Now, this flood was not just any flood. This flood, now, most people might have seen the Mississippi flood here or there, and it might go up 15 feet. That's like a really high flood, you know. You want to know how high this flood was during the DeSoto expedition? It
Yeah.
was so high that the Mississippi and the ocean was essentially brought up onto the land because the Mississippi flooded over on both sides so high, gushing so much water that 40 to 50-foot trees had only their tips sticking out. And when they were canoeing during this, and they were safe in some spots because they were on top of 100-foot tall mounds, so they were safe, and they spent this flood in the patronage of a Indian chief, an Aboriginal chief, who was letting them stay there while they were building new boats to leave. Well, when they were staying there, the flood came. They were safe on top of the mound, on top of the pyramid. It's a pyramid essentially, Mississippian pyramid earthworks. When they left this mound in canoes, okay, only the tallest of the trees were sticking out of the water, meaning they weren't canoeing in between trees. They were canoeing over the tallest trees in the forest. That's pretty amazing. That sounds like a biblical flood to me. And I don't remember the Nile flooding quite to that extent in any account.
That's a huge flooding.
Yeah. And continue.
I'm saying, could it? I mean, what year was this again that this flooded? You said during
This was probably like 1537 or like 1530s ish.
Because I believe Mark Twain in Huckleberry Finn's Life on the Mississippi, he recorded flooding as well.
Right. So this was in increments of 14. So that very well could have been another set of 14 years later that would have happened.
And then also, don't forget the Great Madrid earthquake. The Great Madrid earthquake happened in the Mississippi Valley, and it was said that the Mississippi River went backwards, and it flooded the whole region. But it was interesting that you said about like when it flooded in the areas, how the trees were sticking out the water, and they was riding canoes. Now, there's a story about that. The Ocoee. It was a town of Aboriginals in Florida, and they flooded it, and it's a lake, and they say that the lake is haunted because they said a lot of ships sink, but a lot of ships sink due to the fact that the trees is still in the water. So a lot of people they be riding through the lake, and they'll run into a tree branch, and it appears their boat, and they're drowned, or the boat will go under.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, you have some crazy things. You also have sinkholes in Florida that sometimes form under the water. I just posted one of those a couple days ago, where you'll be floating down a river and an entire island will just sink with 50-foot trees, 70-foot trees will just go down into the water and shoot, gone, swallowed down into the earth. And a lot of times when that happens, it's almost like a cork. Like the land will give out under the water and this mucky island will fall down. And once the tippy top of the trees goes under, and once the whole kind of thing is flushed down the hole, water starts shooting back up, and the sea level starts rising, almost like a cork got popped, if that makes sense, and it starts fizzing up. And you also have floating islands in Florida, entire islands that they could ride horses on that would be moving slowly. the whole time, and they weren't connected to anything underneath. But here, I'll read some other stuff. We don't want to bore you guys too much. But on page 482, okay, page 482. Throughout the province of Guancana, many wooden crosses had been placed on top of the houses. Wooden crosses. Almost none being found without them. The explanation for this circumstance, according to what was learned, was that the people here had received news of the benefits and marvels Alvaro Nunez Cabeza de Vaca and Andreas Dorantes and their companions had performed in the virtue of Jesus Christ our Lord within the provinces of Florida, through which they had traveled during these years. They were held in bondage by the Indians, as Alvaro Nunez himself has recorded in his Comentarios. Blah, 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 blah. So it's saying that there's an entire city with crosses on every single house, the same manner that Christians would. And by the way, I don't know if I'm going to get to this later or if it's laid out. The average house, the smallest house that they encountered in some of these villages, held 500 people. The smallest house in some of these villages, 500 people.
Hold up real quick. So
Sure.
that's the town. That's in Florida, right? That's what you're reading from, right?
Yeah, it's Florida, or it would have been the southeast United States.
So would it be fair to say that maybe some of them structures that's in a lot of them towns in Florida could be what's left over from their villages?
You mean today, even today?
Yeah, even today.
St. Augustine certainly could contend for that. Now, I'm not going to say that's easy to just establish, but what I've seen in Florida, St. Augustine is still nicknamed Ancient City. 500 years ago is not ancient. 100 years ago is not ancient. But the buildings in St. Augustine, they look ancient. And there are some of the only castles on the planet which are actually cast, because a castle has to be cast. You don't build a castle with little rocks and pile it up. That's what humans do. Whatever came before human was not interested in piling up little cute little houses that could just get knocked over. They were casting stone. That's where the word castel comes from. A castle is not built, it's cast, like concrete, like cement. So geopolymer, we talk about a lot on my channel. Geopolymer. Shout out Paul Cook. If you guys know Paul Cook, he does great research in England, the British Isles, Malta, Gibraltar. He goes to these places and shows these, and those are Moorish territories, by the way, Moorish territories across the Atlantic. Many of these places are made out of cast limestone, just like we were talking about early on, cast limestone buildings. So you established how the Maya had that science and art form, but in St. Augustine, and who was St. Augustine, by the way? Well, who did they name that city in Florida after? St. Augustine was a Moor. St. Augustine was a Berber. So St. Augustine, which was the most valuable city in the Americas at that time, because that's where all of the fleet, all of the gold, the silver, the jewels, the emeralds, everything they had taken had to go around the tip of Florida and then up to St. Augustine. And it was at St. Augustine where the ships would take a right-hand turn and go across the Atlantic. So that's why St. Augustine was so important. The Gulf Stream also plays into this. But I was talking about the crosses and the houses. The largest of these houses were like amphitheaters. Okay, they could hold 3,000 people, 5,000 people, the largest houses that they encountered. And these weren't normal people. These weren't like, Oompa Loompas. These were 7 foot tall, 8 foot tall giants with big bows, ornamental headdresses. They said not only were the Aboriginals of Florida so tall and so athletic that their headdresses stood 3 feet up into the sky too, 2 feet, 1 foot. The plumes, the fezzes, the turbans, the feathers, all of it was so magnificent that the people, when they had their headdresses on, almost all of them stood 10 feet tall, because you have a 7 foot guy wearing a 2 foot hat. Almost all of them appeared around 10 feet tall. So this would have been an extreme sight to see when you were a Spaniard, a European showing up, who were rather short. You know Juan Ponce de Leon? Do you guys know how tall Juan Ponce de Leon was? 4'11". He was only 4'11". Juan Ponce de Leon.
Damn, 4'11".
That's
Damn.
pretty short, right?
Yeah, so Tuscaloosa would have had him by
6 feet.
6 feet. Well, five, like 5 feet, a couple of inches.
At least
And
5 feet, yeah.
yeah, I wanted to show you something real quick. Because when you brought up Greco-Roman, I wanted to.
Hit me.
All
You
right,
got it.
so boom. This is something that I've been observing for a minute, right? So when you go into Greco-Roman, like the images of it, right? So like when you look at the images of Atlantis, right? These are the images they give you,
Always,
right?
yeah.
Mm. But then when you look at a lot of the structures, right? They the same buildings, right?
Yeah.
Same buildings, right? And a lot of these universities have them, right? So let me see. This one, right? Well, no, it's not that one. It's this. All right, hold up. I think it's right here. So these are some of the buildings, right? This is in Kentucky. All of these buildings, and they got that ancient look to it, right?
Oh, yeah.
This another style building right there. And like even when you look at, like you mentioned New York, and I done been in New York, and I've seen the buildings. Now that I'm observing the buildings now, I've seen them, and now I can kind of, see the difference between the new buildings and the old buildings, right?
Oh, yeah. You've got the same thing in Mexico City, too. Mexico City is littered. All of Mexico is littered with this Greco-Roman architecture.
Let me see something. You said
You've
Mexico
also got it in
City.
Miami. Coral Gables, City Halls. Pretty good one.
A lot of the universities got them same type structures. Some of them got more of the structure like that's pulled up right here, like these type of buildings. But see, this arch right here is something called the Corbel Arch, right? So you get
Ah,
into, so you got Corbel arches, 300 AD to 600. Well, 300 AD to 600 AD. So I say the Corbel. Let me highlight it. So I say the Corbel arch is made by setting layers of braces on stones, each row projecting further inward from a vertical line. So it's like a 3D type of image, right? Like we see here. You see how the arches go in?
yeah.
How it look like it's a 3D, right? But
Mm-hmm.
this so all right, so say vertical line, say wall below until they meet at the center. Unlike a true arch, the Corbel arch cannot carry a significantly heavier load of weight. Now,
Right.
obviously, that's what they saying there, but we obviously see it here. and we see it not just there, but we see.
Now, I'd probably guess that if made without perfection, it can't hold much. So it probably takes a high degree of skill to get it perfect to hold weight like that.
Here go the image right here. Here go one of the images
Right.
right here, and this is an older one, and this one's still standing.
Nice.
You know, and this one's still standing. And like even when you get into like a lot of these type buildings, right? Now it's another building I just seen that looks similar to something I seen somewhere else. I think it's this one, this right here, right? So this little, I see these a lot, especially like in a lot of these old schools, right?
Hmm.
But this is New York City, right? This is the image in Central Park, and they don't know where this came from.
Right. Oh yeah.
You know, it's similar. It has the Corbel arches. Um, but there's, like I said, there's a lot. Like when there's a lot of structures like this, we see these all through America. And I just felt like I said, like, you know, when you look at Rome and how they give you the structures and the buildings at Rome, they look similar to the buildings like we see at the Capitol building, like in Washington D.C. But not just Washington D.C. We see them everywhere,
Oh
and
yeah.
you know, so.
Atlantis. It's Atlantean architecture. The Greeks
Hmm.
take that from a common Atlantean ancestor to the Americans, undoubtedly. There's no way the Spanish made, because they tell us the Spanish went to Mexico and all these places, and on top of the already glorious Aboriginal pyramids, temples, earth, earthworks. What are the word? Terraces. You know, the terraces on some of these mountain hills. That they actually went and started building Greco-Roman architecture just for the hell of it in
Hmm.
Mexico.
Yep. And
And
once you get to the Algonquin conquest of the Mediterranean of 11,000 years ago, according to the literature, then you'll have a acute understanding how a lot of this usurps around.
yes.
Now you see this right here. This is a They said it was a cemetery that was built underwater. This is actually in Florida.
Oh,
They said,
that's the Atlantis, like Miami. It's near Miami, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That one's
they
crazy.
they gonna say it was built underwater, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But let me see. There's another shot right here. There's a lion
Uh huh.
statue,
Medici lion. Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
and it's called Neptune. Well, the image that when I looked it up, it's called Neptune Memorial.
Right. It
That's
is.
what it's
Yeah.
called, and you know what I'm saying. I think it's like dead in the Atlantic Ocean. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's off of like land, but they don't I haven't seen the whole structure or the whole area surrounding it or whatever. They just give you little bits and pieces here and there. But
Can
all of
can
that is in that same area.
can you keep that up while I pull something else up,
What?
please?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you swap it over to what I have pulled up now.
Hold on 1 second.
Oh wait, no. Oh wait. Whoops. Um, Hang on. I'm gonna get it there. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, I'm sharing.
All right.
That's St. Augustine. That's St. Augustine, Florida. That's above water. The Medici Lion, right on the bridge going into downtown St. Augustine, with all these buildings that I was talking about.
Really?
You want to see some of the buildings in downtown St. Augustine?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What is the actual meaning of that line? Have you
This is
found it?
called yeah. So this is called the Medici Lion, and it didn't start with the Medicis, but it was ironed out into a a very sorry, my buddy just sent me something, and we're getting pretty heavy storm outside right now. But
Wow.
let's look at this. St. Augustine, 1900. Just about everything you're gonna see here was made allegedly between 1670 and 1890 is what you're gonna see here, and this is not what you expect to see in Florida in late 1800s. This was horse and buggy culture. This was people, building out of wood. You go outside of this city, and people are building in wood shacks, like driftwood shacks. And there was no rail line going to this city when all these buildings were made. There was no streets for cars going to these. You guys get the idea. But and anyone who's seen my channel I talk about St. Augustine pretty heavily. If you showed someone this picture right here on the right and said, you're looking at Israel, they would probably believe you. If you said this is Israel in the late 1800s, or this is maybe even Rome, they would believe you with these type of spires sticking up. And those are solid stone buildings. These are not a piece of wood in them, just about. None of the structural integrity comprises of wood in these buildings. It is all solid stone cement or coquina blocks. And talk about Greco-Roman. Here is the pool. This is quote unquote the pool. Let me get a better picture. You guys see this top right here?
Mm-hmm.
This is the pool of the Hotel Alcatraz. Now, is that a pool or is that a flooded building? Because you see today, they're using it as a cafe. And how many hotels really put the pool in the main lobby? Does that make any sense?
No, that don't make no sense. And it's called Alcatraz.
Yes. Or sorry, Alcazar. Sorry.
Alcazar.
Alcazar, yeah. Now, that's got a Greco-Roman tinge to it. Here is Hotel Ponce de Leon, of course, named after a conqueror. Hotel Ponce de Leon. Now, do you know who these were built by? These were built by Henry Flagler, the partner and co-founder of Standard Oil, the partner of John D. Rockefeller. His best friend is responsible for quote unquote building these buildings, or at least founding them, right? Founded. If something was founded, was it really constructed? And these buildings are solid concrete cement. And look at how good the fucking photography is. Like, what cameras were they messing around with in the late 1800s?
Yeah.
You couldn't take a picture with your iPhone that zooms in this good. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Now that's St. Augustine, Florida. And this is nicknamed Ancient City. Now this is only the stuff that survived various fires. Let's look at what was there before some of these fires. I mean, look at that. If you told me that was Rome, if that was Vienna, if you told me this was Naples, if you told me this was any glorious European city, I'd believe you. Anyone would believe you, because that looks like
You think
glorious.
them fires are done?
Oh yeah. What were you gonna say? Intentionally?
Fires is done on purpose.
Oh fuck yeah.
Yes.
Now, do you want to hear something crazy? I think this was the Jacksonville fire of 1901. This is St. Augustine that we're looking at, but not too far from there. Just north, not even.
Time again, 1901.
Turn of the century, right? Big key period for true history and old world history. Turn of the century. Jacksonville fire. There's a very strange account of people were watching the Jacksonville fire, right? So they were seeing there was a fire in Jacksonville, and up until that time, Jacksonville was a glorious stone city, like magnificent, very very magnificent. Gothic cathedrals like you would not believe. And I think we've all seen the famous picture of Charleston after the Civil War, the Greco-Roman pylon with the pillar. Um, this picture I think we've all seen with this Greco-Roman. I mean, what was standing there before the bombing run came through? Just look at that in the distance. Again, such good. This is a Civil War camera, and it's making better pictures than the cameras did in the 1990s. But there's your Greco-Roman pillar, perfect Greco-Roman, and uncoincidentally, a group of melanated children sitting on it. Their city is destroyed, completely destroyed.
You got another picture like that in St. Augustine with them standing outside the gate.
Yes. Yeah. Did I show that one, or you already know that one?
No, you showed it the last time, but I seen it and I think it might have been a
Yeah.
St. Augustine video.
Yeah, you're right. Now it's interesting. The oldest picture ever taken in Florida. This is the oldest picture ever taken in Florida. On top of the fort in St. Augustine.
I got the same. That look like the same type of structure. I mean, the plaster on it.
Right.
You go, yeah.
And if you imagine, in this fort's glory, it was probably painted a light color, like a neon color, either a blue, a pink, or. Now that's not official history, but I would tell you, based off the ones I've seen in the Caribbean that didn't get like blown up or set on fire as much, because this one's been set on fire quite a few times.
They still couldn't bring it down.
Yeah, and this one's special for being able to swallow cannonballs. So this fort has received hundreds of cannonballs. It has not faltered in any capacity. Not a single piece has chipped off because of the uniqueness of the material. Coquina. Coquina is a hell of a drug, guys. Coquina absorbs cannonballs, so no damage would be done to this fort from cannon fire. But what else was I going to talk about? So let's
all the
look
other
at
forts is still standing too. Like a lot of them, they just built a lot of stuff over the top of the fort. Like there was a fort right there, and on the Hudson River where the Statue of Liberty is at. That was a Star Fort.
right.
You know.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm trying to get some good pictures here. You can see the churches. This is Jacksonville now that we're looking at. And this fire is one of America's greatest fires. But what type of fire leaves some buildings perfectly standing and others completely down to the ground in a pile of bricks? The whole point of brick buildings is that they're largely fireproof. So what's the point of building these? And look at that church. I mean, that's glorious. Just the pieces that are left over. Solid stone. All these pieces standing up are solid stone. So what was there before? And this Jacksonville, there's another glorious church. This Jacksonville, well, let me tell you about there's Jacksonville, looks just like that other part in St. Augustine. But what you have is, and some people, look at this, some people call it the Holocaust of 1901, because that many people got killed. It was crazy. But let me tell you, I was reading a eyewitness account one day about the Jacksonville fire, and you asked about like weaponry, or could these fires potentially be weaponized? And to speak to that, I'll tell you of a first-hand account. A guy who, when fires used to happen back then, you'd be lucky if you had a fire station, and it was usually just a bunch of dudes with buckets would do the best they could. So when fires like this would happen, big 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 destructive fires, the city would kind of just say, well, fuck it, there's not really anything we can do. And they would go to like the nearest hill, and this is what would happen all the time when a big fire would happen. The whole town would kind of go to the nearest hill, and they would just watch the fire. And this was common, like I said. Well, when this happened at this fire, and this was a big fire and it kept getting bigger, but they still weren't that worried because they were up on the hill, they were outside of downtown. Well, guess what happened? They're looking at this fire hundreds of yards away, and then they don't feel any heat. There's no sparks whatsoever. There's no ash. There's no, embers falling on them. They think that they're just watching from a safe distance. And you want to know what happens? As the people are like hundreds of yards away, certain items on their persons, certain items like watches, hats, certain things in the clothing, buttons, whatever, certain parts of cars started spontaneously combusting out of thin air with no heat or no fire to blame for it. So it's almost like fire was not raining from the sky, but popping out of thin air. And certain items, it was only certain items that people would have, like a shirt made of a certain material, or the buttons are made of a certain material, where the buttons would melt and the shirt would spontaneously combust. And people who thought they were a completely safe distance away from the fire, once they started spontaneously combusting, here's where it gets crazy. This is a true story, by the way. I'm gonna have to pull it up one day and post it on my channel. When they were like, oh my God, things are, fire, we're not safe from the fire, we have to leave. This story was coming from a man, and the man called his, while they're waiting, watching the fire, things start spontaneously combusting. He then calls his family a cab to get them out of there. So he puts his wife and his kids, daughters, whatever, in the cab, in a car, okay? They start driving away. While they're inside of the car, inside of the cab, their items, certain things start spontaneously combusting. And they're in a roof, you know what I mean? They're protected. So it's not things falling on them. It's not ash or embers or sparks falling on them. This is almost like a frequency weapon type thing, where certain materials, if it vibrates at a certain frequency, or if it has a certain density or a certain metallic, it might have just been the metals, I'm not sure, but things were spontaneously combusting hundreds of yards away from the fire. And when they got, like I said, when they got in the car, okay, you think you're safe, and then your necklace catches on fire. How freaked out would you be?
That's some crazy sounding shit right there.
And that's this exact fire that we're looking at. And that's probably why some people even go as far as calling it a Holocaust. But I'll do one more thing, and then I might have to wrap up here. But last bit from the book, and remember, guys, if you want to check this book out, La Florida de la Inca.
How did you get that book, by the way?
Florida de la Inca. Hey, I told him I'm about to come by his bookstore down there that he got. He got a whole bookstore down there.
So in English, it's called the Florida of the Inca. The Florida of the Inca. In Spanish, the original, it's called La Florida del Inca. So where did I get this book? I actually went down to Miami to go like on a expedition, quote unquote, and we were looking at the Miami Circle, the 444 Brickell site, which is the new site. And then on our way back north, I live in Palm Beach, so on our way back north to Palm Beach County, we stopped at a bookstore in Dania Beach, and that bookstore is called Old Florida Books. So my channel is called Old World Florida. This other bookstore, which is not my bookstore, different bookstore, they have a lot of nice books in there too. I found this guy. I found a lot of other good books too. I found a whole book of Etruscan paintings, like old, some of the clearest pictures of, 2,000 years ago and upwards. But this thing was sticking in there in the Florida section. And man, it was completely worth the buy.
Yeah,
But here, no, continue.
once you're on that frequency, man, things just you be finding things and it don't be by coincidence.
Oh
And
yeah,
a lot of the sources link with some of the research that you currently researching. So
always. It always turns out like that. The
mhm.
synchronicities.
Synchronicity, yeah,
The
synchronicity.
the deeper you go down a rabbit hole, it's almost like you bump into other people on the same rabbit hole, if that makes sense. Like you would have never dreamed of uncovering had you not fully committed to this idea, line of study, whatever it is. And yeah, I always find when I'm about to release a video about something really important,
Mm-hmm.
as I'm about to release it, I have people hitting me up with like the same exact information.
Yeah.
So
That's how it goes though. Once you, like I said, once you're on a frequency, you like stuff just come to your attention, and it be relevant to what you already like. Some of the information that you already displaying to the people.
yes, yes.
So
Well, I'm going to read. This is the last excerpt I'm going to read here from the book.
right.
And this book is crazy. It's got the map too. Got the whole map of the expedition in there. But page 595. A battle that the Spaniards had with the Indians of the coast. So I'm going to show you guys here the path that the DeSoto expedition took through America. Right here. If you could, yep, perfect. So this is the proposed, they don't know for sure. And remember, this is mainstream history, so maybe none of this even happened, who knows, but the proposed route of the DeSoto expedition based on the Charles Hudson map of 1997. So down here in Tampa Bay, the capital seaport of Atlantis, by the way, you had where they entered, and they called this place the Espiritu Santo, the Bay of the Holy Spirit, or, the Holy Spirit River, essentially, this body of water, Tampa Bay. And what do we have right there? Mocoso, like Mexico, or Muskogee, Muskogo, all these different words. You could do that with any of these words. You could spend an hour connecting, like for example, Potano. Well, who knows a little Creek language? If you know a little Creek or Greek, Potano is the same in Creek and Greek. Potano means river or water, like the Potomac River in up near Washington, D.C. Well, in Greek, ancient Greek too, Potani means river or water, like hippopotamus, potami, or if something's potable, or what do you fill up a pot with water? So if something's potable, it's drinkable. So Potami, that word comes to us from the Greek, and that means water or river, flowing water. Well, in ancient Creek with a C, it's the same exact meaning. This is why the Potomac River, Potomac, is the same root as Mesopotamia, which is Greek. So Mesopotamia, those are Greek words. Well, then you have Mesoamerica, Mesoamericans using the same exact word. But like I said, you could talk about any of these names for an hour. I definitely could. But if we follow this route, they went up into the kingdom of Appalachia, and that's the Apple of Eden, Appalachia. And when they went up into here, they came back down, and there's Mobile, right? Mobile, Alabama. A lot of Talisi. You see Talisi here. That's probably where Tallahassee got its name. A couple different places. But they go up, and then they hit the Mississippi River. And when they hit the Mississippi River, they send a smaller expedition forward to see what else is there, but they don't find much. And there's a lot of conflict. They're fighting with a lot of the people, so they have to make it back. When they come back to the Mississippi River, they don't have their ships anymore. Remember, they left them by the ocean. So they start building ships, and they build these ships, the Spaniards, and they're getting ready to leave to go back to Cuba or Mexico to meet with the other Spaniards who had established colonies. Well, when they get on the Mississippi to go down the river, they're met with a military force like they had never seen. Where up until this time, they had been facing giant bowmen, archers in the woods, right? Once they put their boats in the water on the Mississippi, just after it had flooded, like we said, do you know what they encountered? They encountered Greco-Roman style wooden warships. They use canoe because they don't really have a better word for it. Canoes that were so big that they had 2 rows of people, 2 rows of paddlers on either side, 25 people on either side of the ship. Long ways. So 25 oars on each side of the ship. How big of a wooden boat is that? And we don't get taught about those in America. But these were warships that start pursuing the Spanish, trying to kick them out into the sea, push them out into the sea, out of their land, into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, the Spanish are fighting, and they're fighting all the way down the river. All the way down the river, the Mississippi, they go until they get close to the mouth of the Mississippi River. Do you know what they encounter when they meet the Mississippi River? I'm going to read it here for you now. When they're about to hit New Orleans, this is what happens. I'll read now from page 595. As I have said, the Spaniards were 3 days in taking care of the caravels. And the caravel is like these homemade ships that they made, the caravel. 3 days in taking care of the caravels and restoring their bodies, for their greatest need was to satisfy a drowsiness which had wearied them exceedingly. Then in the afternoon of the 3rd day, they caught sight of 7 canoes setting out toward them from some rushes. And in the first of these canoes, they beheld an Indian, very different in aspect and color from those they had left inland, for he was as large as a Philistine and as black as an Ethiopian. The cause of this, and this is their explanation, this is not obviously true. The cause of this exceptional swarthiness in the coastal Indians is the salt water in which they are continually fishing. For the land being sterile, they sustain themselves by this means. Furthermore, the heat of the sun, which is more intense along the coast than inland, contributes towards making them dark. Standing in the prow of his canoe, this Indian shouted to the Castilians in a gross and pompous voice, thieves, vagabonds, and loiterers who, without honor or shame, travel along this coast, disquieting its inhabitants, depart from this place immediately, by one or the two mouths of the river, if you do not want me to destroy you all and burn your ships. And I see to it that I do not find you here tonight. For if I do, no man of you will escape with his life. So that is a exceptionally melanated chief addressing these Spaniards right as they're about to leave the Mississippi in what is essentially New Orleans, right? Where in America today do we often find some of the darkest people? New Orleans, along the Mississippi River. So this is no coincidence. And this is not just a reaction to the water, like they're saying. This is melanated skin, plain and simple. And the only reason they're remarking on it in this instance at the end of the book is because right in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico coastline, in essentially what is the nose of the face of the crescent moon, that is the Gulf of Mexico, you have the darkest people in the Americas, or we can surmise we're the darkest people in the Americas, because they say they're as black as an Ethiopian. Not copper-colored, not, melanated, black as an Ethiopian. And I would wager, this is me talking, not the book, I would wager that the Florida natives we were talking about were closer to copper-colored. Copper, right? And once you get towards the Mississippi River, right on the coast, these people were black, like in the true sense of the word. And not black, means blank or bleach or blanco. I'm just saying dark. These were dark skinned. And to me, for someone who's, approaching this, obviously as a European, how can you ever really debate the fact that there were dark-skinned people here in America? Not just here, but Aboriginal to America, when one of the earliest sources known to man that you can find on the original inhabitants of Florida and the southeast United States clearly says that they are so. So, yeah.
Hey, that's some heat, man. I know we got to get out of here, man. Shout out to everybody in the building that tuned in to this, man. This was really one of those heat. Hey, I don't know if you want to have something you want to add in before we get out of here.
I'm in no rush, so feel free to.
All right, let's get it. You can open up the call-in number. Maybe call in. We got the call-in number on the screen, you guys.
Can I smoke a little pot before?
Man, yeah, take your time, man. We're going to play a little quick 60-second break.
Okay.
And we'll be back with everybody. So do your thing, man. Light up, toke up.
Perfect.
Light that motherfucking backwood up, man. Or that joint. You ain't gonna smoke a joint. I know you.
I hit a bong like a good old honky should.
Right? Yeah, go do that. Go do that bone, man. I'm cool on the bone.
I'll be right back.
Go, man. Hey, make sure y'all hit that like button. Support the channel, man. Support the channel. Thumb up the video. Support the channel. We'll be right back in 60 seconds, man. 60 seconds. Go use the bathroom. Go hit a little toke. We'll be right back in 60 seconds, y'all. See y'all in just a second.
Yeah. Hey, man, all I'm saying is, nigga, you always got something to say. It's like you don't shut up. On the track.
A lot of niggas died 1865. Single Michael fled high, ain't gon' let it ride. Everybody hot and black was never on your side. They do maps to tell your apps where you sleep at night. They put that white man on. Got you begging them for answers like that white man know. Had you swearing you was African, that's that white man home. Had you proud to be a savage, that's that white man's zone. And I ain't talking shit, this by definition. And being savage was our nature, y'all be non-existent. We the
Shout out to everybody that's in the building, man. I want everybody to drop those fire emojis, man. Let's get a few people to support the channel, man. Don't forget, support all Aboriginal platforms with the $5 cash out donation, man. We don't care who it is. It's dropping Aboriginal information. Make sure you support their channel. We have a $5 challenge in effect. So let's see how many people we get to support the $5 challenge effect. Support the channel. For those that do want to support the channel, cash out, PayPal information is ticking across at the bottom of the screen. Attention, this one. Are you here with us today, brother?
Yep.
Yo. That was some heat y'all niggas dropping, man. I wish I was able to screen share. Y'all got some. That was a nice bag y'all got into.
No, definitely, man. You know, like I said, I'm when I'm listening, I'm quiet. I'm listening. So you know what I'm saying.
Right.
It's always something to learn, especially like I said when it comes to America. So you know, I'd rather listen instead of like if I got any questions or anything that I want to get some clarity. You know, I definitely ask. You know, but I need to get that book. I'm gonna get that book and run through it, check it out.
Yeah, I definitely need that book too, man. I definitely need that book.
But they
Yeah.
said when they was doing Disneyland, they kept finding giant bones. And then see niggas think that shit fake or whatever. But you know, I mean, you know, it's said that, you know, they had giants here up to 15 feet, right? But most of the bones they finding is around like 7 feet, 7 to 8. You know what I'm saying? They are all in Florida too. Florida and in Mississippi, in Tennessee area. You know, it's definitely a lot. I want to ask Dr. Longo, let me ask you a question, man, about like what made you start doing them videos about like, you know, the structures that you found throughout Florida?
So here, I'm in, ready to go. So, it's funny I get asked that a lot, and I really never have a good answer. Like, for me, I've always been into the hidden history. You know, when I was 18, I was like infatuated with the history of the Templars, right? So I was into like conspiracy theories when I at the end of high school, getting out of high school. And you know, everything's a conspiracy theory. Like, I'm very into health and cannabis, of course. I think
Hell yeah.
I think thinking men are benefited greatly by the use of cannabis, and that's outlawed. So what else is good for you that's outlawed? Just, you know, many things. Almost everything that's really good for humanity is outlawed. And that lends itself to just a certain way of thinking. Like I said, you know, I live a very specific way. I eat a specific way. I only drink a specific way. And it's foolish not to carry that same attitude towards the history you're ingesting or
Right.
So
the
you said
religion.
you
I got
said
I got
conspiracies real
I got
quick.
I got a caller on the line. Let me get to the caller real
Yes,
quick. 214 area code. State your name. Where you calling from?
Hey, Fab, this is Empress Summer Rain. How are you?
Peace and blessings, Empress Summer Rain. Shout out to you. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, sweetie. Thank you, Dr. Longo, for telling our history. But I just need to clear up one fact. I am of the Potomac River tribe. I'm Rappahannock. I'm Anacostan. I'm also Patawomac. The original name of the Potomac River is the Patawomac River,
The
which
Panawomac.
spilled into the Chesapeake is Patawomac. And I have lineage in the Patawomac people, as well as the Chesapeake Bay, the Rappahannock, as well as the Powhatan. The
Beautiful.
Powhatan, exactly. See, the Potomac River, which is between Maryland and Virginia, is where 90% of my family is from. My lineage goes back to 1342, and I'm still not through because those are grandparents.
Beautiful.
Exactly. And I can show proof of it. And many have heard me speak of this before. But when it comes to the name of our rivers, you got to understand, when you claim Aboriginal status, which I am in, you must know the original name of all the rivers that run your territory. The Susquehanna, the Patawomack, the Rappahannock, which lead into the Chesapeake Bay, which leads into the Delmarva Peninsula, which leads into the Atlantic Ocean. So I just wanted to clear up that fact. Love you so much.
You know I love you too. Always. Oh, I appreciate you. No matter of fact, let me shout out Empress Summer Rain for the $10 PayPal donation. We really appreciate all the support. Shout out to Empress Summer Rain. You definitely got to be in tune with the names of your local rivers, because that was a main way of travel. You know, in my area, Tennessee, we have the Tennessee River, which is the name of where Tennessee come from, which means land between two rivers. We have. I can't hear you, Dr. Longo. Your mic is muted. I don't know what's going on over there. What's going on?
His mic ain't muted.
Oh.
His mic ain't even muted.
Something going on over there.
Go ahead, just give yourself time. Check your audio because we can't hear you.
Yeah, so you got the Tennessee River, you got the Chattahoochee, you got various, the Oneida River. These are the indigenous Aboriginal terms that will later on become your Tellico, your Holston River, your Tennessee River, and the indigenous people highly occupy those areas. So I appreciate you for dropping the Empress.
Oh, I love you guys. I love you, A1 and Dr. Longo. Thank you for telling our history. Bye-bye.
Peace, sis. Thanks for the insight.
Hey, thank you. Y'all call in, man. Call in number is on screen. Make sure you call in. Dr. Longo, I don't know if you can fix your audio over there. I don't know what's going on. Maybe you have to jump off, come back. I don't know what's going on. We can't hear you at all. Not one word. Everybody saying they can't hear him in the chat. Yeah, the Chattahoochee, the Chahowee, the Holston, the Oneida, the Watauga, the Hiwassee. We can get into these particular creeks, rivers, canals. These would have been a highly trafficked area. You know what I mean? Especially most of your older towns have a creek called First Creek, Second Creek, or this creek. These the first, second creek would have been the first, second, third options of traveling to the inner workings of the cities in historical time. We're gonna answer one more call before we let A1 go back in. We got a 901 area code calling in. State your name and where you calling from.
Peace. Calling from the south. Good to speak with you again, brothers. Good to speak with Dr. Longo again. My question is, you discussed philosophies before, and we see foundations for the Crescent Moon and Islam. We see foundations for Christianity through the Papa Boot. We see foundations of Hinduism and animism. Which philosophy would you say that the people that you spoke on earlier, which philosophies would they have cultivated to more?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I would like for Dr. Longo to answer this. Can we get a dang your mic is not, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Dr. Longo. Can't hear you at all. Get off and come right back on. Get off, hit the link, come right back on. I think that might hit it out. But I will say that the culture that we see is all of them that's credited to, whether it's Hindu, Islam, we see the Christianity, Hebrew, Abrahamic, all the Abrahamic faiths and everything in between was a natural point of culture and customs. And each significant area would have probably differed based off of their cultural practices. All right. So yeah, man, I think that's dope. Mic check. We still can't hear him. What the hell is it your headphones not plugged all the way in? Shout out to Dr. Longo, man. We're gonna get his mic together. That was a good question. I want you to ask that question again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, I asked it for you. If you want to take off, that's fine, and I can get a couple more callers.
Yeah. Because it seems for him to be having mic interference as I've entered the room, so I'm just gonna step out. But this is the back. And good speaking with you brothers again.
You already know, man. Peace and blessings, man. Take it easy. Shout out to Ross Noddy for the $5 Cash App donation. Shout out to Ross Noddy for the $5 Cash App donation. We really appreciate that. Shout out to Ross Noddy. Let's get a mic check, Dr. Longo.
Okay. How's
There we
this?
go.
Are we all good?
We good to go now.
Thank Jesus. Okay. So I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last question. If you could
That last question was like, well, out of the religions that we pointed out, Islam found here, cultural practices,
Right.
Christianity, Abrahamic faith. Out of those people that you was mentioning today with the Inca, those people who built that circle in the sky map, which one of these practices would be credited to these people, even though it wouldn't have been called what we call Buddhism, Hindu? What cultural practices would you credit to that culture if we can find one today?
Now, they were devout astrologers. And I would say anytime a civilization has a good knowledge of astrology, they're going to be more inclined towards the source of all mythologies. Well, without giving too much of a pretentious answer, I would say, and it's kind of cliche, but it goes back before the Hindu. Because what do the Hindu tell you? That yes, there was Aryans coming into India, but before the Aryans came into India, someone came into India from the south, from the ocean. And these were melanated people. The Aryans were likely may have been lighter skinned and coming from West Eurasia. But the people before, the Nagas, right? You've heard terms like this. Mesopotamia, Mesoamerican. To me, it all points to the Gulf of Mexico origin, which you have Guatemala. Guatemala being the name of Buddha, Mala being, or Maya being the mother of Buddha. So Guatemala and Maya, Guatemala, that's where the Maya lived, almost, Guatemala. There's your pre-Buddhist, pre-Hindu source, because the culture was so rich in the Gulf of Mexico that
not only did it give you a name, right, to a culture that you could credit to, it even gave you a location like Guatemala, right, which we find Mayan artifacts in a region city of the Mayan called
Olmec. And the Olmec, right? Olmec is the old Mecca. The old Mecca. Do you guys want to see something? Last thing, really cool. And I'd please take more callers, but I'd just like to pull.
Yeah. Please, more callers. So you said the Olmec is the old Mecca, and the
old Mecca.
Like, what is Mecca today?
It's Saudi Arabia, but that's the fake Mecca. That's the new Mecca. That's a little piece of the old Mecca that they've brought back, and it's asteroid. And what area is extremely rich with asteroid-derived minerals and metals materials? The Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Haiti, especially with iridium. Radium is found in trace amounts, large trace amounts.
And then in that
Florida water.
Mexico, my bad, me to cut you off, but also in that Gulf of Mexico, we have a documented, allegedly, if you want to go with this, impact landing that created what we call the Gulf of Mexico ultimately today, separating Cuba and that land going into what we call. So you telling me that they brought back something that would have flew in the air after impact and took a piece of that?
Yes. And that's what they worship so fervently in Saudi Arabia today. And if you've seen highly magnetic material placed in front of insects, it makes them do loops, right? Well, what does the Kaaba, this is what they call it, the piece, the Kaaba in Mecca. They call it Kaaba. Why? Because it's a cube. So it's shaped like a cube. It's in Kaaba, or it's called the Kaaba. Kaaba plus Cuba equals, Kaaba plus cube equals Cuba. And Cuba is just another way of saying Kaaba, because the Kaaba is a cube And this tells you that it came from the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico.
Then you got the ants walking in
land.
circle, going in their loop. They go around in the loop around the actual damn Kaaba in Mecca.
And the Gulf of Mexico is the Q. The Q. So Q is like one of the most sacred letters. It represents fertility. It represents the egg being fertilized by the sperm. So this
Somebody
is
pull up a picture of the Gulf of Mexico and let's look at that almost complete circle with Cuba going inside of it as a straight line.
Yeah.
It almost mimics a Q literally.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's the ba or the bow of the Q. Cuba is the ba in the Q. It's the tail of the Q. But here, could I show this mask here that was found off the coast of Florida? So, as if those Peruvian connections were not enough, earlier, here we have a quote-unquote Incan death mask or Inca funeral mask that was found off the coast or on the coast of Florida. Now, they say this was from a shipwreck that was treasure being brought from Peru. Well, that may be the case, very likely. But let's see what else they say about it. Something very, very unusual about this artifact. Where is it? Shit. Okay, well, I'm going to have to find it. But basically, come on, man. All right, well, it's not this page. I'm going to have to find it. This mask washed up off the coast of Florida. And it is made of iridium. It has iridium. This is literally made of space. Here we go. Here's the article. I'm going to
share a meteorite face mask. What?
So here, yeah, I'm going to share a different screen now, and this one will tell the story. If you can pull that up, you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, lots of ads in here. Part of ancient death mask containing quote unquote space metal discovered in Florida. This is Fox News. This is not like Anunnaki.com, this is Fox News, right? Saying this. Archaeologists with Seafarer Exploration Corporation have unearthed an ancient death mask dating possibly thousands of years BC. The artifact, which is as thin as a piece of paper, was found on Melbourne Beach, Florida. That's where Jim Morrison is. Shout out Jim Morrison. And that's not all. The mask contains a precious metal, as an X-ray has revealed, the presence of iridium, possibly from a meteorite. The theory is the item was taken by Spanish tomb raiders, and the piece of metal was part of a funeral headpiece from a pre-Incan civilization. So this is not Inca. This is pre-Inca in Peru. This is some of the earliest evidence of man's ability to work metal, to metalwork. And
where was this found at again? Where was this found at again?
Melbourne, Florida, right? Which is,
and you said it's pre-Inca,
yeah,
which ain't too far from them circles that we just looked at
right.
not too long ago.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Someone says it was looted from Machu Picchu. Wow. Dr. Torres told Fox 35 it was looted from Machu Picchu. Now, that's pretty insane. But iridium, that's a spaceman. Iridium, by the way, glows.
So we smelted meteorite? That's crazy.
Yes.
That's taking metallurgy to a different level right there.
Mm-hmm. But
let's get 1-2 more callers, you guys.
Sure.
Let's get 1 or 2 more callers. Call in, you guys. When we get ready to get out of here, we got a few things to do. It's getting late. Got to get up early in the morning. And this was some heat, man. This is my second live stream today, man. I pulled a 3 hour earlier with some heat, heavyweight jam. This is another one. So We outdid that one from earlier, man. This was a heavyweight jam right here. Make sure
We're
y'all
on a
belt.
marathon.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
Oof, I'm getting sore.
Uh-oh. No calls. Let's see the calling numbers on the screen, you guys.
Oh man.
Well, guess nobody has any questions.
I guess I bored him to death.
Or satisfied them.
True.
you know. Right? X-Men shit. No, that's definitely some X-Men type. When you get into some of this history, it is magnificent. Even when you get into some of the other sciences that was used, some of it is used. Acoustic science is used in a lot of this stuff, not just for sound, but sound barriers, open sesame. I mean, who knows? The sky's the limit from the sophistication of some of the science that goes into a lot of this stuff, you guys. So I guess we ain't got no more callers. Well, we got one more caller. 832 area code. 832 area code. State your name, where you from. You live with Aboriginal Power, Dr. Longo, and the Touches one.
Copper colored grizzly.
Hey, Alabama.
Can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear, brother. I hear you.
Y'all put the cover spell on me, man. You put a spell on me. Thank you, and Longo, Trevor, A1. Appreciate you all for the time and attention. Because you are talking about my backyard. Now, I ain't gonna go down the rabbit hole. I grew up in Miami. But what I will ask you, you've been trying to get him to say something more about Timakua. Some people refer to as Duval, the cracker named Andrew Jacksonville. You mix up some of that because he's in the middle of the state, aren't you, Trevor?
You calling me Trevor Lawrence?
Are you in the middle of the state or are you nearby?
Are you calling me Trevor, like Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback of Jacksonville Jaguars?
I think that's exactly what he called.
Yeah,
I thought you were Trevor Longo, is what I understand from the first.
Here, hang on. I got one for you.
Are you in the middle of the state or are you on the coast?
I'm Palm Beach County.
Okay. What is your understanding about Ocoee?
Oh, what?
Ocoee. If you haven't done any research on that,
I don't know much. Tell me.
The Ocoee massacre, the election 100 years ago in 1920.
You said the Ocoee. You said the Ocoee massacre of 1921.
That election day, exactly 100 years ago from the 2020.
1920. Okay. November 2nd. I'm looking at it right now.
And anything that you're talking about with Orlando is a disregard and a disrespect to those Aboriginal ancestors. And the gentleman's name is Julius Terry. But I'm concerned about the disregard for understanding the Ocoee history. Half hour.
There's no disregard. I just, I hope you don't take that personally.
Maybe we have a delay here. We kind of stepping on each other. But I want to wrap up with one particular statement. Maybe you can research, or you have power. Possibly about 400 acres of that ancestral land is occupied currently by man-made orange juice factories. And Coca-Cola need to be paying some restitution. You feel me, Power? A1?
Correct.
Yeah, Coca-Cola pulls out a couple million gallons of, or I think 1 million gallons of water a day from the Florida Springs too, and under some other subsidiaries. But Coca-Cola, I'm in favor. They need to do a better job.
If you have it,
I don't know. I think we're on a delay here, but I'm gonna look into the Ocoee for you. I think we're just on too much of a delay here.
I think you on the delay, so I'm gonna try to.
Yeah, so
I'm
I
gonna try
was
to.
fading out. But one last thing is, remember Rosewood, the movie done by Bing Rain. It's the only restitution that was awarded and reneged by the Florida legislature. That power. So Rosewood and Ocoee, we can get a little bit more deeper dive. Maybe that would help some people.
Right, I
And
will.
the big peninsula. You know that big swinging dick that's hanging down there in the Gulf? You know what I say, Ab? Apples and arrows, elbows and assholes. Keep them running, Copper Color Grizzly.
You see my name, Copper Color Grizzly?
Alabama, good money, the OG. Hey, we got one more call we're gonna take, man. We got the hold on, let me get this in. 41. We got a 410 area code. I mean 414 area code. You talking to Aboriginal Power Dr. Longo live.
Yeah, you can just call me Royal Bloodline, the one and only.
Royal Bloodline, what's going on, brother?
What's up, fellas? I just wanted to jump on here real quick. Aboriginal Power, A1 and Dr. Longo. Just to let you brothers know, man, thank y'all for what y'all been doing. We really do appreciate the work and time and effort that y'all putting in to help educate our people and just to show us what's really going on and show us our real history and our real roots. It really does give, I can speak for myself and other like-minded people, it does really give us a sense of pride and real ownership with knowing our real roots is here and being able to build off that and, do things in the future, So really, when I comment on things, I be telling y'all just keep doing what y'all doing because this, I can feel it like people are really starting to see the truth and catching on, and that mass explosion is coming soon. So y'all just keep doing what y'all doing. We really appreciate it, man, and just thank y'all for what y'all do.
Man, I appreciate you too, brother. Appreciate you. Take it
Thank
easy.
you, man. I appreciate that.
Shout out to Royal Bloodline. Shout out to Royal Blood. One more caller. 419 area code. State your name, where you calling from. You live talking to Dr. Longo and Aboriginal Power and Autochthonous one. Who do you have a question for?
Dr. Longo.
All righty.
My name is Michelle Norton.
Michelle, what's going on, sis?
Hello.
Hey. My first time calling, so
I appreciate
kind
you.
of nervous.
Don't be nervous. We all fam. It's all good. We won't. Take your time.
Okay, thank you.
So, whenever you want to ask your question and who you want to ask your question to, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'd like to say thank you to A1 for the. I'd like to say thank you to A1.
Absolutely.
The book that he told us about earlier. I ordered it. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
The other question is the Greek Creek connection. I've done some research on my family, and I've already been told that I was Black Creek Indian. But can you guys go in a little bit more with the Greek and the Creek connection, and I'll hang up so I can listen.
All right,
Yes.
no problem. I will
Yes.
ask. I'll let them elaborate on that. I appreciate you for calling in, Michelle.
I
appreciate you.
Is it Michelle or Crushell?
Michelle Norton.
Michelle, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for
Yes.
calling. That's a great question, or great topic. Who's familiar with Tonavi? Are you guys familiar with Tonavi? Tonavi? He has a good channel, a great channel. He might be tuned in right now. But he sent me something. I made my Creek Greek video I think a month ago about, and it's chock full of good connections. I mean, real nails in the coffin. Each part of that video could be a proof in itself of a Creek Greek connection without a doubt. Now, he sent me something, however, which only further corroborates this connection. It doesn't prove it, it seals it. It seals the deal. Now, so credit to him for sending this to me only a couple days ago. And if I didn't have this, I'd just point you to any of the evidence in my own Creek video. But since this is new, I'm going to send, or new to me, I'm going to say it here. From Godfrey Higgins' book, Anacalypsis. Okay? This is, I think, I don't know, 1800s if I had to guess. No later. I don't know the date, so I shouldn't have spoken on that. But Godfrey Higgins' book, Anacalypsis, quote, "It appears to me that the Greeks had been to the Creeks what the Romans had been to the Greeks. They had been the civilizers and instructors of a people who were before barbarous and ignorant," end quote. That's volume 1, page 376. Volume 1, page 418, quote, "The Greek alphabet, as I have already said, was the alphabet of the Creeks with a C. It is an undoubted fact," end quote. Volume 1, page 414, quote, "It is clear, therefore, that there was a great similarity between the religious and mythological systems of the Creeks and the Greeks," end quote. Page 381, quote, "The resemblance of the Creek architecture, I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier. I've never heard anyone say the Creek architecture, because in their defense, I think they had architecture, but in the mainstream, they had no architecture. It was teepees in the mainstream. So what architecture are they talking about that is similar to the Greeks? That would have had to have been stone. That would have had to have been glorious. Now that's page 381. And the last quote that he sent me, and I'm sure this book is chock full of them. So I know you like buying books, and I thank you for buying that book, because the more people that have that Florida book, Florida de la Inca, the better. This one's called Anacalypsis by Godfrey Higgins, if you'd like to get that one. But the last quote from page 387, "The Creeks have their ancient tradition of the deluge, their ark, their dove, their olive branch, and all their history bears a striking analogy to that of the Greeks," end quote. So that's Creek and Greek. I mean, they both wore togas, by the way. When the Cherokee, who are, not the same as the Creek, but largely owe their heritage to the same blood, when the Cherokee were being addressed formally in letters in the Civil War, or just before the Civil War, they were being addressed in ancient Greek or Paleo-Greek. And there was Americans who had Greek heritage from Greece who were able to speak ancient Greek to Cherokee chiefs. Now that's insane. Now, Creek is Greek, right? Same word Kabbalistically. Now, what if I told you the word Cherokee is also the same word as Greek? Cherokee is also the same word as Iraq. And that sounds pretty ridiculous, right? Well, the first city ever in the mainstream history in Mesopotamia was called Uruk, or Uruk. Uruk comes from, not formally, but I'm telling you, comes from Iroquois or Cherokee. Cherokee became the Greek. Now, you have to, understand words Kabbalistically, not just how they're spelt. Cha-ra-ka, especially understanding Paleo-Greek, is almost the same as Paleo-Hebrew, Phoenician. You have cha-ra-ki and ga-ra-ko, Greco, right? Greek, ga-ra-ka, and cha-ra-ka. Cherokee, Greco, it's the same word. Iroquois is the same, because that cha at the beginning can be pronounced hard, like a ka or a ga, or a cha, like Hanukkah. So, Iroquois, Cherokee and Iroquois are the same word. Now, don't tell that to them because they might get a little angry at that. But in their ancient phonetic origin, this is the same word. And it's no coincidence that we call Native Americans, what do we call them today? What's like the new PC terminology? First Nations. First Nations. Well, if you call them First Nation, the first nation ever was Uruk, or Sumeria, a city in Babylon, or Sumeria in Mesopotamia. But one more thing to drill this point home. I can give you a clear as day connection. And if you know someone who speaks Greek, and if you have a map of your area, and if you live in the Southeast United States, I'll bet you $1 million that if you have someone who speaks Greek and a map of your area, you can find multiple native names in your area, be they Creek, anything. And I know the lady earlier said, I think Empress Rain, I think was her name, something like that. Great caller as well. She said that Patawomac, or what was the Potomac? There was another added syllable. Patawomac, I believe.
Womack, yeah.
Now, that's all well and good. And I'm not saying that doesn't disprove what I'm saying, because naturally you would have somewhat of a game of telephone after hundreds of years of separation. Now, this can be best demonstrated in a place in Florida, many places in Florida, but one near me that I found myself just testing out this theory with a friend who spoke Greek was there's a place called Palatka. Palatka. That's a Creek word. Palatka. Or not, one of the tribes descended from the Creek or Muskogee or whoever inhabited Florida at that time. You had Palatka. Now, when I talked to my Greek friend, that Greek friend informed me that plaka, so minus one syllable, but the same word Kabbalistically, plaka has the exact same meaning. So palatka means crossing or bridge. Plaka means walkway or crossing. So that's Greek and Creek. And I found that myself. And if you have a map of America and a friend who can speak Greek or Creek, even better, you speak someone who speaks Creek and someone who speaks Greek, I'm sure you could find a million words. But I'll give you another example. In Northeast Florida, there's Mayaka tribe, the Mayaka. And yes, that has Maya in it, but that's another conversation. The Mayaka tribe went extinct, allegedly. Do you know who replaced them in the 1700s in Florida? The Majorcans. Majorca. Greeks. Minorca or Minorcans. They're culturally Greek. Majorcans. Replacing the Mayacan. Mayaka. Majorca. I mean, what are the odds of that? Where you have a culturally Greek people replacing a culturally Creek people in the exact same spot, the exact same territory, 10 years before the United States had even been conceived of. And there was not many English speakers in Florida. But
no, that's a hell of a connection, though.
Creek and Greek, they both wore togas. You can find pictures of ancient Creeks, or sorry, not ancient, 500 years ago ish, 400 years ago, negotiating with Europeans. And the men they're negotiating with, the Creek natives, not only are they 7 feet tall, they're wearing togas. They're wearing Greek style togas, clear as day. Many, many connections. There's a pepper that's only found in Northeast Florida that is from Minorca. And they don't know where it's actually from, but the Minorcans use it in Northeast Florida. The pepper, they have no idea where it comes from. It's closest to an African pepper and a pepper from the Yucatan Peninsula. So what's it doing in Florida?
Hey, man. We ain't get no more callers, man. So I guess that's it. Y'all ain't want to
Okay.
call it. This was a good one, man. I ain't gonna lie. This was some heat. It's a lot of information to digest. It's a lot of sourcing. Hopefully, you guys go back and rewatch this to get some of these sources. Check it out for yourself before you make a rash decision or speak on something you have no information about. Shout out to everybody that is in the building. I do appreciate everybody for coming through once again. Shout out to all the viewers that's in here. We got 292 people still in here rocking out. We hit a little bit over 3 hours and 20 minutes on this live stream, so this was a heavyweight jam for sure. Hawk Yos, Tight Sam, M Brown, War, Free Papu, Noble Atumbe. I see you guys in the chat. Appreciate you guys for tapping in. Hanu Kiel, Tantra's one. Do you want to say something to the family before we get out of here? Shout out to A1 if he's still in here with us. Finna have to catch the playback. Yeah, Khalil Finch. Yeah, you definitely should catch the playback. Definitely catch the playback. Kurt Baptiste. Definitely check the playback, brother. Hey, somebody asked you in the chat, where's Rednecks from? I think that might be a troll question.
Redneck?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, redneck.
Oh,
Who has
no, my bad. He said red heads. My bad. I maybe I fucked up.
redheads? So, I mean, that's something I don't get into a ton on the channel, but I do talk about Finland a lot. And I know this is probably where I differ with some of the Aboriginal and Moorish, research communities. Is I, being, descended from Europeans, have my own theory about where the original, not Europeans, but original Caucasian, because we know they didn't come from the Caucasus Mountains, not originally. They might have landed there at some point. But where does red hair come from? Red hair is not entirely, identified with light skin, but it very much is because of the recessive genes, the highly, highly recessive genes that can get swept over by dominant genes like you'd find in Africa, Asia, South America. So to me, this indicates red hair being a highly recessive gene and largely coinciding with green eyes or blue eyes comes from the North Pole originally. Blonde hair, orange hair, red hair come from the North Pole. And this is where light-skinned, light-haired people are indigenous to. Now, I know there's some talk about hybridization and things like that. And there's truth to that in my view, but that would have come after, because from this original source of the European peoples or light-skinned peoples, you had three main tribes. The one tribe split into two, and then the two split into three. And one of these tribes is the element that could really be blamed for much of the banking, war making on the planet. And that's not to say that, melanated people and indigenous peoples are not immune to committing crimes and waging war and terrorizing. But this one of these tribes is called the tribe of Dan. Tribe of Dan. The Rus, this line of Sven, or this is where you get a word like Sweden, Sven, and the tribe of Dan. So Rus, the people of the Rose, is where you get the name Russia, right, or Belarus, Kievan Rus. Then you have tribe of Sven, which is where you get Sweden, Scotland, Irish people. These are a different group of people. And these ones tend to be more persecuted, heavily persecuted. The Irish, I'm Irish, were treated like dirt up until World War II. They were not considered white up until World War II. Irish people and Italian people were not considered white. Even me, blonde, blue eyes, back then, my ancestor, dare I say, might have been more like a slave, because he came over on a boat, and I can point to my direct ancestor who came over on a boat. and he shoveled coal until he dropped dead and fell into the coal machine, my great-great-great-grandfather. And he was from Ireland. Now, those were largely slaves, indentured servants, right? This is your tribe of Sven. These people were not getting treated so well. Whereas the tribe of Dan, which is the third of these tribes, the most warlike, the most who tends to gravitate towards banking and stuff like that, you find these presiding over the kingdoms of Denmark, Germany, France, England, and so these places tend to be responsible for much of the war making of the last 500 years or so, if not much longer. And of these three tribes, I'm going to get into this in a big video coming about Finland, but where does red hair come from? There's melanated people that have red hair, so I'm not saying this is the only source of red hair, but on the planet today, the vast majority of people with red hair are what you could call descended from Aryan peoples. And it is my opinion that the original Aryan white race came from the North Pole. That's kind of what the Germans were saying. That's what Hyperborea is. Now, this is a product of ice. So I could also answer this question with blue eyes, green eyes, blonde hair, red hair, light skin are a result of bleaching, heavy bleaching caused by living in ice near the North Pole for thousands of years. This is why huskies have blue eyes. What are the animals that can have blue and green eyes? Most mammals on the planet have brown eyes. The only animals that have blue or green eyes, largely, with the exception of lemurs, so lemurs have blue eyes, so we'll put them to the side for now. Cats, dogs, horses, alpacas, the most highly domesticated animals on the planet, and the ones that originate from the coldest and highest altitude areas, tend to have blue eyes, like a husky. Huskies come from the north, have blue eyes, blonde, bleached hair. This is where your European, quote-unquote, European phenotypes came from. Now, up until the Ice Age, you did not have Aryan people, white people on this planet. So the European race is the most recent race to show up on this planet. Up until then, prior to the Ice Age, when this planet was subtropical, you had melanated, copper-skinned people living in and as far as the North Pole. Europe, Africa, Asia, you name it. That is your source, mankind, before we had the human race. So you had mankind, then you have the human race. This is laid out in the Bible too. It's clearly said. Mankind was a copper-colored, subtropical race. And this was not even a race, it was a family. There was one family on the planet. You could go from Helsinki, Finland, to Somalia, Mogadishu, Somalia, and see the same family on this planet and be treated like family because everyone looked largely the same. So there was no crime. And when the ice came, and ice is the punishment, mankind was punished with ice and hell and snow. What is hell? Hell only started getting hot when they started burning witches to make it scary. Hell means cold. Dante's hell is freezing. Hell is winter. Can you tell me the name of hell in Spanish or Italian or any Latin language? It's infierno. Now, what's the name of winter? Invierno. So this is the same word. Winter and hell are the same concept. It is man's worst enemy. It's a lack of life. There's a reason melanated people stay away from the cold, stay away from frozen lands. They gravitate towards the sun. And it's no coincidence people who look like me and lighter. I can I'm darker than Sean King, by the way. If you see me in the sun, but people that are lighter than me come from the North Pole, and it's no coincidence they gravitate to colder, more frigid areas. I love Florida because who can't? But I hope that answers the question, and that was probably a long answer. But
No, I think it covered it well. Explaining to your understanding to where you think or what you believe red hair come from. Like I said, not excluding that it doesn't come from anywhere else, but just based off of your understanding. So I think it was dope, man. Shout out to Dr. Longo for coming through with that heat. And Thompson is one coming through with that heat. And shout out to you guys for sticking around, man. Like I said, make sure y'all get y'all pens and paper, replay the video, catch some of these sources. Hey, man, we'll see you on another heavyweight jam, man. Thompson, just one, you want to say something to the family before we get out of here? Like his mic muted.
No, I'm good. Yeah, man. Like I said, I like to listen and learn new shit too. It'd be a lot of stuff in a lot of these books. That'd be very it has a lot of these books has a lot of unique history, and you hear different, you hear about different things going on at that time, whatever. But yeah, a lot of stuff connects too when you really look at it. Once you come out of the mind state, what you think, about how a lot of these authors and a lot of these people who write these books, and even some of the maps and some of the stuff that they hear. So definitely shout out to Dr. Longo, man. Definitely appreciate it as always, man. Shout out to all the Aborigines, North, South, Central, and the conjoined islands. Peace.
Absolutely, man. Dr. Longo, was always a pleasure. This was some heat, man. That people really going to enjoy this when tuning in to this live segment and information, man. So shout out to you once again, Dr. Longo.
man, thank you guys for having me. Always good to be on.
Where can they find you at? Where can they find you at? Just in case some of the people tuning in that don't know, where can they find you at?
Sure. Old World Florida on YouTube and old_world_Florida on Instagram. And I've got a Twitter too and some other stuff, but it doesn't really matter.
Send it out, man. Is it Old World Florida on Twitter as well?
I don't know. My assistant runs it. I don't have Twitter or anything, but I have a Twitter. I'm just never using it.
Right. Well, all right, man. Y'all check it out, man. Old World Florida on YouTube. Old_Florida_world on Instagram. Make sure y'all go follow, man. Y'all know your shit, brother, Aboriginal Power. Make sure y'all tune in, man. For those that do not hit that like button to share the live stream, last chance, hit that like button, share the live stream, and support the channel, man. We about to get ready to get out of here, man. I appreciate everybody for tapping in. With that, go ahead, brother.
One last second. Didn't Farrakhan call white people the ice people? I think he did calls us ice people, yeah. So it's further evidence, but that's all. Just one last thought.
Hey, man, it's a lot more evidence that point to it. But when we think of North Pole and the South Pole, we think of very cold areas. But historically, it would not be like that. And there's maps from ancient map makers, mapping out these places before they had ice. So, the history's still there. It's a lot more to comb back, more layers to get to. Shout out to everybody in the building, man, for tuning in, man. Make sure y'all support the channel. I see Supreme Chief Holiday in the building. Make sure y'all support that channel, man. With that being said, be safe, be aware, stay vigilant, stay dangerous. It's your brother, Aboriginal Power, and we out. Peace.
Sally. I really been feeling.
Don't forget to support the channel when you go out, man. Cash out, man. PayPal. Make it a lot of us. Don't forget to support the $5 challenge. It's very important. You got to do that. Get a few more
programs is being ran and shit is one and the same. When your thought pattern is different, they look at you strange. The same ones you used to see me with, now we estranged, cause now my mission different. It's some shit I gotta attain. As I go inside my mother's womb, my soul was ordained. I battle on. The war zone is Babylon. My one task is to bring the flock and the cattle along. Trying to change the vibration while niggas they Babylon. Now focused on getting my money tower of Babylon. My catalog is self-subscribed. I'm staying strong. I know my destination. I travel. Don't know the road. Don't give a fuck about the status and status quo. Combative is data low. Cannot compute with this blockchain. I'm pinging off of towers, can't triangulate my pen game. I'm off the grid. The lyrical EMP. They try to follow down a rabbit hole that's filled with TNT. The last of a dying breed. Just aim fire and squeeze at demonic chapters. I know the sigil on his sleeve.
And crush the regalia, shining like diamonds to the sea. I'll show you Wonderland. It's up to you if you believe. The son of the matrix, shining like nothing you conceive. A bomb with a pen, removing nothing's gonna leave. Alarmed by the wind, we smell percussion in the breeze. The drummer go in and leave nothing but the leaves. A nod and a grin. Be the last thing you ever see. And the problem with him lead to a problem with a den. A lion sent down from Zion, bringing drama to your kin. I promise I'm like Obama or Osama. It depends on how God order my steps. When you stepping up to him, I'm different. Can politic or demolish them, pick a fence and stay behind it, cause the lions is out again.